Cloutier.
Here.
Bob Crow. Russ Lockley.
Here.
Ed Ionati.
Here.
Ross Pelletier.
Here.
Ron Pelletier.
Here. Sign here, I'd like to point out the document that you will there, two exits, my make it look at this, and we have two exits to the rear. I have a motion. Exactly. Motion. Second. Motion favor, second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay, ayes have it. Okay, now, first, point down where it is. Clarification of decision. Okay. Matthew, Inspector. Location, Central Park, 7, Washington, applicant, city, the dimensional construction accessory drawing, unit 37 feet from the rear property line to 50 feet from the front. Okay, that application was voted on last month, Mr. Chairman, the motion ratified. Second.
Aye.
Okay, the next one is distribution.
Aye. Aye.
So moved.
Aye.
Next application.
Aye.
This time here, there is no longer. I guess we'll remove the
Chair, I do believe you have to close out this meeting and reopen as a zoning board of repeal, zoning board of review, serving as the board of appeal.
I was gonna get all these.
Oh, okay, no problem. So under new business, the owner applicant is Martha Patrick. Location is AP 72 lot 51.003, 160 Reed Avenue. Zone is R20. Applicant is seeking a dimensional variance to install a 6-foot fence in the front yard. The fence will be placed behind existing 10-foot high arborvitae's.
They don't have what's the kind of introduction. About a year ago, that's a key intersection. 50 Reed Avenue, the stop sign, that they were shipping. Okay, we swear so. I'm slowly considering 160 Reed Avenue is in the R20 zone, it's DP 72 lot 51.003. It's at the intersection of Shippey and Reed. It's a single family home in an area of similarly situated single family home. Conforming lot, conforming setbacks with the required frontage.
All right, great. So the front of the house faces that intersection with Shippey Ave, which comes to a stop sign. At that stop sign, there's a slight incline in the roadway as it meets Reed Avenue. The lights from the headlights of the vehicles shine into the home at 160 Reed Avenue. There's an existing hedge in front of the house that's doing a fair job, but not really completing the blockage of the light. Ms. Patrick would like to place a fence, 6-foot high vinyl fence, which would match the fence which exists, there's only one S in that, on the boundary, side boundary, behind that hedge. So you wouldn't be able to see it from the street, but it would block the light. As Ms. Patrick told me earlier tonight, she's 87, so she would plant trees, but she wouldn't live to see them get high enough to do the job. So she's opting for the fence. Because the intersection does not go through, she lives on a straightaway on Reed Avenue. So our usual concerns about sight lines for traffic and those things do not apply in this case. You know, that's the reason why the ordinance exists. So that turns won't be affected. This is going to be set well back into her lot behind an existing hedge, and there's no corner at that location. I don't see any reason to belabor this application. It's going to be a 64-foot white fence as set out in the Ventura fence description, and the entirety of the fence will be behind that hedge, not crossing into the driveway in any way. Thank you. So the hedge itself is probably right up against the right of way for the roadway. It's a few feet away from the finished pavement. Yeah. Yeah, if you could go down a couple.
Behind it, you're not gonna see it.
Yeah, that's a good picture right there, Mr. Chairman, of where that hedge is located adjacent to the street, and you can also see where the fence would fall behind it. There's an existing fence on the side boundary. It'll connect to that fence.
How far off the?
No, on the other side. Sorry, Mr. Cludier, I misunderstood the question. That's correct.
How far off the bushes does she want to put the fence?
It'll be, right against,
Right against it.
yeah.
I'm
She-
sorry, against the bushes. Okay.
She told me an anecdote earlier that she bought some artificial Christmas trees, and she and her niece tried to tuck them into those hedges to see if they could achieve the same result. So she's getting proactive. I love it. Right, 4 foot is allowed, 6 foot requires a variance. They are staying. Yeah, I would imagine that'd be a condition of the approval, yes.
No.
Just to block the light, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
You're right. My property was pointed up, right at the house.
That was by a two, Bob. It was the same thing. I agree with Austin. Makes sense. Yep. Aye. With the stipulation rust on the bushes, right? If you want.
I approve with the stipulation.
Yeah, I approve with the stipulations.
Next application is Tammy Whiting. The location is AP 61 lot 11.2, 190 Station Street. Zone is R20. Applicant is seeking a special use permit and dimensional variance to construct a detached 18 by 25 garage located in the front yard 10 feet from the northeast property line and 5 feet from the northern side property line.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Tammy Whiting. It's my first time in front of a zoning board, so. Yes, I do. Yes, if you don't mind, I'd like my husband to come up and help me explain. He does a better job at it than I do.
Excuse me, before we go on, a friend of mine just texted me. He said he can't hear anything that we're saying, the board's saying. They can hear podium, but not anyone.
Is your mic on?
Mine's
Hello.
Just make sure your mics are maybe within half a foot of your mouth when you're speaking. Gentlemen.
Please raise your right hand.
Yeah,
Yes.
please give your full name and address.
Willard Whiting, 190 Station Street.
Sorry, what's your first name?
Willard Whiting.
Willard?
You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth in front of this board?
I did.
Okay. Please explain to me what you'd like to do.
Okay. You want to go ahead?
We're looking to put a detached garage on our property at the front left side of the house. And the reason why we wanted to do that, I'll let my husband explain.
Sorry, guys. We purchased this house, back in October of, last year. So, it doesn't have, we wanted to put a, addition on it or whatever. And, we need more room because we have a car and and some motorcycle, seasonal vehicles that we want to store. And, we got a survey done to find out exactly where our property lines were. I researched, we were actually luckily able to find an original, site plan. And, we were able to locate where our septic was, where the dry well is located. And, we did a personal survey and we said it would be the best spot would be where we located it. So we're requesting to put, this, garage, they show in the bottom right-hand corner, the 18, it says 24, but it's actually 25. But the original, we have a lot of ledge in the back that says proposed addition. That's something else we wanted to do, but that falls within our setbacks. The original site plan has the whole foundation turned the opposite direction. And, the dry well, shows where the bulkhead is on this drawing. But I'm in construction. Sometimes you have to make modifications due to the land. And there's a lot of ledge where within the setbacks over here, where you can see, as you're looking at the screen to the right, there's big, huge boulders in the ground. And I'm assuming that it's all ledge over there and the elevation's slightly higher. And 190 Station Street is slightly higher than us as well. So it goes up, and then 188 goes down significantly. We considered on putting the garage to the right, but it would cause problems for egress and ingress for our neighbor there. I did speak to our neighbors too. He said, "I don't mind you putting it there, Will," but I'm concerned about the egress and ingress. And then when we looked at it, I talked to Kevin next door. He was like, "No, I don't mind that there." And so we decided to place it there, and I had them professionally draw it up. I do apologize, they didn't put in the dry well where it is. It's right in the front where it says driveway, and where that 40-foot 8 inches, it's approximately right where that arrow, where the gentleman was putting the arrow. So there's a dry well there, and that land to the left is down significantly. So we propose to, as you can see on the new site drawing, we would, it says driveway to be removed. We work with the town and see what they suggest us to do over there. Because even right now, it's kind of hairy to get out of our driveway where we had about 10 trees over there, pretty good sized trees. We removed those, which helped tremendously getting out of the driveway, but we still have to back out of our driveway. And in the center where it says 131, there's a bunch of ledge and granite sitting there. We want to remove that and we're going to use the boulders to put like a wall along our property line all the way from where it says 131 all the way to the right. And then we were going to have our one entrance in, and we would enter the driveway, the garage. And it's not a garage that it's only going to store seasonal vehicles. It's not going to be used like the lawnmowers and the cars and the motorcycles and whatnot, bicycles. And we were going to enter it that way. It's a 12 gauge steel building. They did give us we did put a deposit on it. They didn't give us like an actual, they gave us like a preliminary, but we want to, and here's a picture right here where you can see that's approximately where the garage would be. You can see a stump to the right. I did have about 4 trees ground. You can see it like the patch. The trees were massive, and there's still a one straggling tree right there. I didn't take it down because I thought it was my neighbor's, but when I realized I did the survey, it's actually, I could have took it down. So that will come down too, because I'm just worried about it falling down on the property line over there. So that would be eliminated. And you can see with how the trailer is now, it's about 11 feet high, that trailer right there. Just 10 foot 8, I think it is. That's exactly where the garage would go. And then we would landscape that upon the review with the town. How they want us to do it, but because most of that is all the town property right there on the side. Even that So pretty much, it's,
Where the fences is town property.
that fence right there goes about 4.5 feet onto the town property. That does,
So
that,
when it
fence.
slopes down towards the tree,
Yeah,
that's all, that's town road technically.
yeah. But that was really thick trees. The trees were like rotten and falling. It was pretty rough over there. And I
Does
actually.
Anybody use that,
Use what?
that? Road?
That's Station Street,
It's Station Street.
just up from the ballpark.
Yeah,
And the
that's,
entrance.
we're across the way is
No, I'm saying about-
Forester Park.
It's the neighbor put it up, I assume.
Oh,
I don't know who, but we want to, we're gonna do a new fence eventually.
Oh, no, the right of way is where the fence slopes down, that's technically in the right of, the town's right away from the street. That's what.
Yeah.
That's what.
oh,
Yeah, that, and, but I try not to come out of that side of the driveway just because it's not really safe. If you're familiar with Station Street, it can get busy in the morning and the evening, but it's kind of a blind turn, it kind of comes
It's
up.
it's almost at the top of the hill.
Yeah,
And
and
when
they
you
can't
come by
see.
the old group home, it's literally, you're coming up and making a right hand
Yes.
turn and then you're right there. So
Yeah.
you're in the
I-
drive,
when
you're in
it
the
took me-
road.
You know how many times I drive past when I first moved there, whoa, it's my own house, because,
I worked at the bottom of the street for several years. I know that road.
yeah, so we wanted to, and there's a slight decline, so the crest of the hill is just beyond the fence. And that whole thing, you can see like a red flag in the center there. When it rains, the water comes in through from the road into that, and it's just like a river. We did, whoever owned the house before, they put cobblestones in there, but we can't get anything to stay in there this year with the rain. It just washes it out. So it by eliminating that thing, it would eliminate our issue with that too. But we like exhausted a couple options. We talked with our neighbors. This isn't gonna be a issue for egress and ingress to the property. It's not gonna hinder anything getting in and out. By me eliminating that entry, it's gonna eliminate any safety issues for us getting in and out. And we have there's a healthy tree right there, and then you can see to the left of the photograph, there's rocks. They're just huge. They're in the, I don't, it just aesthetically too, it's gonna look nice. It's gonna put windows facing the street, and it's color matched to our house. So it'll be white in the gray, and yeah, we plan on doing some, make it look nice.
Kind of utilities you're gonna run out,
Just
power?
just power to the for the garage door and some lights.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a,
Garage
No
doors are gonna-
water.
garage
No
doors are
water,
gonna
no.
face where?
the garage door. So if we're looking at, if you look at it's gonna face this way. So if you look
The
at
front
that,
of the truck would be the front of the garage.
yes, yeah, and then to the right of that truck, that asphalt will be removed.
Nothing's gonna, your garage doors are not gonna face station.
No, they're gonna face our property, they're gonna face 188 Station Street property. And the way our house is, it's kind of shotgun ramp, so our
Okay,
front,
why would you wanna be only 5 feet from the property line?
because, it just looks good. It gives us personal privacy for our backyard, because our backyard.
For maintenance reasons, we never, very seldom. go
Well, I
over
did ask a
7
question.
feet.
I asked a question to the, someone who they said, well, you can't go any more than 5 feet.
We usually don't do 5 feet.
I mean, 7 feet isn't gonna change or break me, or even 10 feet, but
You
10
could do-
feet would be, I want to have more room to swing in the driveway. And aesthetically, I mean, I care how it looks aesthetically. We have a lot of plans landscaping, but we're not doing anything that we know what we're gonna do here. But the way, there's, where the boulders, like, there's a incline that goes up about 3 feet immediately over there. So when I'm standing over there, that 6-foot fence is like over my head a good amount. So I don't want to mess with his, like, I have to retain it.
So to compromise with the chairman, could you move a couple
I
of
could go
feet?
2 feet easily. I could go 8 feet. I mean,
How about 7.5? That's
well, I'm not, the only thing I wanted to, that's not gonna change anything. I mean, at all.
for you.
Oh, yeah,
But that's fine.
yeah. That spot particularly,
We're always worried about, like, if you have to do some type of, like, even if they're building this stuff, we don't want you having to be on your.
Yeah, no,
neighbor's property.
this-
Even though you got the okay to do it.
that
it's
fence
just-
is 3 feet on my property too. That fence is 3 feet on
So
my.
it's your.
So you're gonna be even closer to that.
Well, that fence is gonna get changed. That fence is
If it's
gonna
on your property, it's your fence.
yeah. Kevin's cool. Kevin, we were talking, we want to change the fence anyway.
Yep.
Change the fence, it'll be back.
Yeah, it just needs, and I think, cause there's so much ledge over there and there's trees over there, they just kind of, they
Yeah.
put it where,
They found some holes, yeah.
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, cause it's not the straightest and the nicest looking fence.
So you're gonna grab 3 feet once you move the fence.
Yeah, but even I staked it out. I didn't do it yet, but I did get little flags and I put the 4 corners, so in case,
Yes, I'd like you want to see it.
yeah, it's there, yeah. It's,
I'd like you to put it 7 feet from the property.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. And we wanted to maintain that 10 feet because the Station Street kind of goes away from our property, which actually helps the egress and ingress. So the
So
street's
you're gonna
further,
be 10 feet away from station.
10 feet away from the property line, not Station Street. It's like 20 something. Station.
Yeah, see, if you look at this.
Yeah, so it looks,
Look at this one.
You know, like 12
yeah,
feet
it looks, that's why we originally were gonna do 5 and then
See,
somebody
Station
suggested we
Street, yeah,
do 10.
but their property line's back here, this one. So
It-
it's from the edge of the road there,
It gives an illusion of it being a lot further back because the
It is.
road is,
they want to stay 10 feet off the property line. You're
What is that
proposing to
grade?
just move it back.
gives
Russ,
the illusion of it being way further back.
from the
than it
road
is.
line, in other words, how many more feet have they got from where the road is, looking at
See,
the
it
road?
looks like he's got 12 and a half feet
On that, that's the smallest point, and then on the other end, I have
plus the
20
10,
something feet.
so you're gonna be 22 feet.
22, yeah.
Yeah, it gives the illusion of it being way back.
No,
So,
doing that too, you eliminate the water problem that you're getting.
yeah, there's a major, like, it says driveway to be removed because I was gonna pitch I'm gonna redo the driveway.
It looks like it's all pitching to your
Yeah,
land.
we can't go, it's, especially this year, it's been awful.
Oh,
I got-
yeah.
Yeah, but luckily we have the cobblestones that we'd have, they probably put those.
Yeah, I made the cobblestone.
You were there when they made the cobblestone.
He
No
moved with
comment.
Me, but that's besides.
Yeah, so aesthetically, on paper, I mean, it looks neat, but when you go there and you see it, it gives the illusion of it being a lot further back because of,
All right, so if we go up there, you'll have it staked out.
they're there already, the 4
Already
corners.
staked out.
Yeah,
It's already staked out.
it's already, the little flags, the 4 corners are within a few inches. Right now, it's 5 feet, but 7 feet, that's not good.
So we want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
All right, see if there's any other questions. from the board. Have any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna ask you to take a seat, see if there's anybody here that'd like to speak on this application. Here,
Thank you for your time.
or against, or just have a question on the application. Is there anybody here that has a question on the application? Okay, is there anybody on the line that has a question on the application? Yes,
Bob, when you ask, make sure that mic's near you so that all the folks online can hear
okay.
that.
Yeah, is there anybody online that would like to speak on this application? Okay, like to have a motion that, we go out, take a look at this and render a decision, within a reasonable time. Do I have a motion
So moved.
for that? Okay, motion's made by Russ, seconded by Ed. All those in favor say aye. Nays, ayes have it. Okay. We will go out and take a look at this and,
We did a date certain.
Yeah, my request would be to also move to continue this to a date certain if you feel comfortable that you can accomplish that site.
yes,
visit
we should
before-
be able to accomplish this.
And then,
And I
Carrie,
think
do
the
you have
first
the
Wednesday of
September?
next month.
September 6th,
September
2023.
6th. Okay. We'll render a decision.
And if you don't mind, just making a formal motion with that date certain as part of that motion, please.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue this to the September 8th meeting, and we'll render a decision at that time.
and that's- all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Russ made it and Ron seconded. Okay, any nays? No nays. Yes. Yeah, because we're gonna go out and take a look at it. Okay, do we have anything else other than, for the meeting tonight, other than the, appeal? Okay. This time here, I'd like to have the appeal read into
Did it close out first?
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, I have to close out the Coventry zoning board of review meeting. Open up the damage appeal. Yield is.
No, it's the sixth, September sixth, correct?
It can't be the eighth, that's
I
right.
have
yeah.
three. I'm sorry, what?
September sixth.
Correct.
I said the eighth.
Yeah, September sixth.
It's the sixth.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, the zoning board of review serving as the board of appeals.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a full board.
Entire board is present. Approval. Yep, that's
Do
correct.
you have to read anything into this or we just?
No, I need a motion to close out the original hearing and a motion to open as a zoning board of review.
Okay, do I have a motion on the floor to close out the zoning board of
So
review?
moved.
Second.
Second, made by Russ, seconded by Keith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes, ayes have it. Now, at this time here, we need a motion to open up as the zoning board of review, as the board of repeals. Am I correct?
I make a motion, we open up at the zoning board of appeal.
Okay. I need a
Second motion.
on that, okay. Keith made the motion, Russ seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes, ayes have it. Okay, now we're sitting here as the Board of Appeals. For the applicant. Kerry, I'll let you read it into the record.
Zoning Board of Review serving as the zoning board of appeal in re appeal of JW Studley Tree Services continued from June 26, 2023. In the matter of JW Studley Tree Service Development Plan Review, appellant is Jessica Lynchenberg. Location is AP 27 lots 115 and 116, 11 Reservoir Road. Zone is industrial 1 for lot 115 and general business for lot 116. Appellant is appealing the development plan review decision of the Coventry Planning Commission granted April 28th, 2023, and recorded on May 1st, 2023, in Book 2274, pages 992 through 996.
I'll turn it over to us.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, before you begin, I think we should just, as a housekeeping matter, indicate the standard. It should be in your record that the board must follow in this case, the standard of appeal. Maybe I should read that into the record.
Yes, please.
And then the next thing I would ask is that we mark the exhibits and then hear from the applicant and the respondent.
Okay.
So tonight you sit as the Board of Appeals, and in this particular case, you are not allowed to substitute your judgment for that of the planning board. But you can only consider the findings of the planning board and the record of the commission, as well as the filings that are made in this case, which we'll go over. And you must find that they made a prejudicial procedural error, a clear error, or lack of support on the weight of the evidence. So there's three bases, right? Either they made a procedural mistake, they didn't follow the open meetings law, as an example, but that's not alleged in this case. Or two, they made a clear error, like they applied the wrong provision of the statute or the ordinance. And that's some allegation of that in this case. And thirdly, it's against the weight of the evidence, meaning they're wrong because there was overwhelming evidence that it should be denied and it was granted. And you can't substitute. It's about whether or not the planning board made a mistake on those 3 points, those things. It takes, in your case, now there are the five of you here. Is there one alternate here tonight? Two alternates. Okay, so I think you need to declare who are the 5 voting members. And remember, it takes 3 out of those 5 to overturn the decision or to sustain the decision. It's a majority vote of 5. So you should declare who is
an active voter tonight. The two alternates are, the two alternates.
Leonard Doig.
And so obviously they can listen, but they can't participate or deliberate. And they can't vote unless someone were to recuse. If any member have any reason to recuse, then one of the alternates would step forward, right? Your decision has to be rendered obviously within 10 days, and any appeal from this board is to the Superior Court. So any appeal after this is within 20 days of this decision. What, for the record, what you should have before you, and I hope you, Kerry provided a package to me, and I assume every board member got the same package. You should have a notice of appeal filed by the appellant, which includes the notice of appeal, which is 1 page. And then it appears that there are 11 reasons why she alleges the decision should be reversed and the decision. I believe that's all that Ms. Lichtenberg filed.
That's correct.
So that's the filing. You have to, that's filing number 1. I would make that applicants or appellants exhibit number 1.
Okay, for the record. Just to help you, I do own property on Reservoir Road.
Are you within the notice area?
Not that I could see.
Where you
I
sent
did not
notice?
receive a notice.
If you didn't receive notice, then technically speaking, you're not in the butter. You're not excluded. If you feel that you can't be impartial, then you could recuse.
I do not feel I can be impartial, but I do not want to present any.
So it's good that you notified, you obviously put that on the record, that you live on your own property on Reservoir Road, but you are not on the list of butters,
Not on the list of,
and you don't feel that that fact would affect your decision here tonight.
you're correct, I do not.
So that, I think that's sufficient notice. If somebody objects, the appellant can object, and at least it's on the record. So I would ask the board to introduce the package presented by the appellant as appellant's exhibit number 1. Okay. Can we just do that? Do we need a motion, or can we just do that as a matter of course, Madam Clerk?
I don't think you need a motion, I just think you need to submit it
Okay.
formally.
But I would do that as appellant's number 1. And then, in addition to that, the respondent filed a memorandum of, on behalf of John W. Studley, applicant, that is 11 pages, along with exhibits A through L. And that should be appellant's exhibit number 1. Okay. We got the, I'm sorry, we got the applicant and or appellant, and we got the respondent and or appellee. So they both have 1 exhibit. Those are the documents. Now, these documents also include the proceedings before the planning board. I don't know, are there anything else, Madam Clerk, that the planning board had that's not in either one of these filings?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so these filings happen to contain that. You're supposed to have everything in front of the planning board in front of you. We have their decision here. You have a transcript of their minutes, and you have other documents. It happens to be included in all the respondent and appellees exhibit number 1. And the clerk has indicated that this includes all the planning board material. So those are the documents that are before you. It's very clear to me that you can only make decisions based upon the findings of the planning board and the record of the planning board. And both the appellant and the respondent must contain their remarks to the list, the 11 listed items that the appellant raised.
She filed her appeal based upon these 11 items. These are what the remarks have to be contained to. And then the board should then have to remain, after they make their arguments, pro and con, the board should review those items and decide whether any one of them or more of them constitute a prejudicial error procedurally, or against the weight of the evidence, or a clear error of law. One of those three things. You make those decisions. I don't know if that helped, but that's, I thought should be said. So my recommendation is now you hear from the appellant and the applicant to go over anything she wants to say in addition to her filing. Then you allow the appellee and the respondent to respond. See if anybody else has anything else to say on line or anywhere else. And then the board begins its deliberation and decides how they want to proceed. That's my suggestion.
All right, very good, thank you. Okay, do we have the appellant here? Please step up.
Through the chair, I just want a point of clarification. Right now, we have exhibits A through L on the record. It would be my understanding, just to clarify with legal counsel, any additional exhibits, as I know will be entered into the record, begin with exhibit M. Is that correct? Or would you say these exhibits are a different classification of exhibit?
I don't think you can submit it.
Mr. Chairman, what I had done is I had this entire A through L, I referred to as the respondents.
Yep.
Exhibit number 1. And Ms. Lichtenberg's notice of appeal and reasons for appeal, along with the decision as the applicant's exhibit. They both have one exhibit. This exhibit has one A through L.
Understood. And just so that you're all aware, she did provide me with 4 separate documents just earlier this evening that she intends to provide as additional exhibits, and that's something that legal
That would
counsel
be
may
number
wish to
2.
weigh in. Okay.
Are those, again, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest, why don't we get the exhibits straightened out? If there are exhibits to be presented, they present them to.
I didn't think.
I think we need to submit them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want some time to look at that while she's going over her argument, Mr. Cronin? Well, I think you should give Mr. Cronin a chance to see a new exhibit.
But the planning board
Did you
didn't
say
get a
this
chance.
on all the?
It's already done.
Yeah, the board hasn't seen those exhibits either, right?
Correct.
Because we
No,
gave them
no.
directly to you.
She did. She has not presented these to the board or anybody. She's just provided to staff just a little while ago. I think it's worth us straightening out how we're going to accept those.
So
That's what I'm saying.
my suggestion, my suggestion would be this: you always accept any exhibit that's being offered. And then you determine whether it's relevant, irrelevant, but I don't want you to reject an exhibit consideration. If it's with a courtroom, it becomes this hyper-technical as being marked for identification and fully admitted, or marked for identification and not admitted. That's a courtroom situation. In my situation here, I want all exhibits to be marked for the record. Anything that could be presented, the board could say, we appreciate this, but it's irrelevant. And we'll make that determination. I don't want you to reject something being offered.
We won't.
So I think we should give Mr. Cronin a chance to see that for a minute. And while he does that, maybe Ms. Lichtenberg can begin unless Mr. Cronin, or maybe we should wait a few minutes.
Should we make copies of it so we can see it too?
I thought they had, you don't have enough for the board?
We just have one copy. She's provided one copy of the 4 different documents she plans to speak to. I think she was going to present the rationale for why she brought them to the attention for tonight. So it may be worth hearing why she's identified these 4 documents. I believe 3 of the documents are public documents that already exist within town records. And 1 document is just her speaking points that she's typed up for tonight. But I think she wanted to, through her oral presentation, describe why she brought these to light and wanted this to be part of the record for this application. Now, I'll let the board and the solicitor determine the amount you should consider these documents in any decision you may render tonight, being that you're just receiving them now.
I guess there's 3 points I want to raise, Mr. Chairman. 3 points on this, and I want to do it for Ms. Lichtenberg's edification, right? She's not represented by a lawyer, so we want to make sure that she is not prejudiced in any way with the process. But technically speaking, if the documents go to information that was not presented below at the lower level, they may be rejected by the board as being not part of the record. We don't know that yet. But they may have some implication on the record. I don't know, but that's something the board's gonna have to determine. And the fact that they're being presented on the night of the appeal without advance notice, to any party to the board presents, that's like a procedural problem, right? There's a technical problem in that, do they relate to the record below, right? Are they part of the evidence below? I don't know. I've never seen it. I haven't seen it yet. And two is being presented tonight. So this may lead to a need, if we determine that you're gonna accept them, it may lead to a need for a continuance. Because Mr. Cronin would need time to review them, and he may want to supplement his memo. I don't know any of that, but I want to just lay that out because.
Well, I'd like to see you look at it and Mr. Combs look at it. And give me your intake on both these.
We can
Or
look at
rather the boards, give it to the board.
Do you want us to recess for
Yes.
5 or 10
recess,
minutes? Can we
Read
do
this
that?
and go through it and give the board the feedback.
Can we recess for 5 minutes?
Yes.
That fair?
Can you make a copy so at least he can have,
We have the ability to make copies? Okay, we still need to recess for 5 minutes.
I make a motion, we recess for 5 minutes.
second motion?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays, ayes have it.
With her? Could we use that to make a copy to? Oh, okay.
That's a we won't know this till we look at it.
How's it work?
Yes. Oh, perfect. That's perfect. They did have a. It was a note. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. I'm having 100% hospital next year. That's where not as bad. I had diverticulitis for 15 years. No, just nuts. Yeah, nuts. Well, what happened is I've been eating on south. With this weight, but that not roughage. Yeah, so a supplement fiber. The thing that they're always advertising, a lot of people think that's you can't, because it's not on the diet. It's difficult. But so I'm kind of east and south. What is it? Why is this really tough? So I think so. Just the lettuce, no tomatoes, no cucumber. Celery's really tough to get by. Cucumbers, I get that. English ones without. And when I got the nutritionist yesterday, she recommended plum, so there's more meat, seeds, and then you're gonna buy a chopper. So you just cut it in half, and clean up the seeds, you put it down, put this thing down, mince it. So it not cubes it, so you like one like a salsa or something like that or whatever. So, but just I'm going to my regular GI doctor. Just do what where we're gonna go in from it. I stopped. Yeah. I don't. Top and bottom. Oh. They'll do the top first, then they do the back. They use a different term. No, it's the same one. You know, same kind. With the short shot. Yeah. So. It's just that, like, I stopped taking that amoxicillin yesterday, and this morning, it's uncomfortable. So, how far down? In weight, I went from 366 to 317. Almost 50. What's the goal? 100. Well, that's my plan. Yeah. He's a better. Oh, yeah. But the drawback right now is like, when you get out of the shower, so. Don't want to give it to somebody. What your needs? You go out, put a little Velcro, or whatever, or super glue. But, I'm doing. Just the other day, in what, in your turn? Oh, really? Thanks. Kiddo. Thank you. Yeah, that's why I'm asking. One, two. Yeah, I can double say Eric. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I did. I got doubles. All right, I gotta take it to fire.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I tried to sell. You sure you guys get double?
I did. This all look alike. This is the same.
No, they're not. They're different. No, they're not.
Look at the dates. Oh, yeah. Well, I did. 29. Yeah.
Jacob Peabody. Holy mackerel. There's a blast from the past. Yes. Across the street. It was on either side.
Yeah, ready. Ready, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, maybe before we do that, we'll just go over these documents. Maybe before she does that, we'll go over the documents. So I, pursuant to the 5-minute break, we've copied the documents. They appear to be, there's a document that has unnumbered that has 1, 2, 3, 13 pages. There's a 13-page document entitled Jessica Lichtenberg Appeal of J.W. Studley Development Plan Review. It appears to be comments that the applicant's going to read to you. That's the top. Along with that document, there is 2 zoning certificates. One, both dated June 29. One related to Assessors Plat 27, Lot 115. And one, that's a 2-page document. And one also dated June 29, 22, Assessors Plat 27, Lot 116, also a 2-page document. Those 2 are attached to it. And then there is a two-page document that says, that's dated March 1st of 2011. It's entitled Notice of Violation. It's a 2-page document. And then there is a one-page document dated February 8th, 2012 from Jason Peabody to Situate Surveys, 1-page document. There's another 1-page document dated June 9th from Terry Kowalski, the zoning enforcement, to John Studley III. Those documents, with regard to the comments of the applicant, should certainly allow that to come into the record. With regards to the zoning certificates, they are, you notice they're addressed to Jessica Lichtenberg. They're virtually identical to 2 zoning certificates that are already in your package. Hers are dated June 29, 2022. The 2 in your packet are made out to address to Thomas Cronin, and they're dated March 22nd, 23. They're virtually identical zoning certificates. The only point, the only objection Mr. Cronin has as to those is there is notations in pink magic marker that are not part of the document that appear to have been entered by the applicant. We don't know that, but I should say that with stars and underline. He wants you to ignore those, you know, with regard, and that goes for the same with regard to the 2-page notice of violation, the 1-page letter from Jason Peabody to Situate Surveys, and the letter from Terry Kowalski to John Studley has no notations. So what I would suggest is that all those documents, those package of documents that I just described, be admitted as the appellant, and applicant's exhibit number 2. Accept it in. So she's got 2 exhibits, her notice of appeal that you already have in front of you with the decision attached and her reasons why. Now you now have this. That's her 2 exhibits. Board have any questions? And then I would.
Actually, good one. So just to summarize, Mr. Cronin basically and Mr. Studley basically have this information here, other than her comments section.
Right, they do.
Okay.
Well, they do. The issues about the references to the notice of appeals in the package from the planning department and in your package, those documents are not contained in there, those 2 1-page documents, but the reference, these go back to 2011 and 2012. They were outstanding issues at that time. I'm sure Mr. Cronin will address them. For the record, they are not outstanding any longer.
And the planning board saw these too.
Planning board did not see these documents, but the planning board saw the report from the planner outlining that these notice of violations back in 2011, 2012 were filed, were outstanding, were addressed, partly because of the development plan review process. So they are not outstanding now. My understanding is they've been withdrawn, but I will stand corrected if Ms. Korowski has other evidence.
Not at this time.
Are you comfortable with all this information?
I am.
So, you come. You study this?
No, as I'm not sure that Ms. Lichtenberg's memorandum ought to be marked as an exhibit, but it's really, either way, it doesn't really, I mean, it's just her memorandum. And the two zoning certificates, as Mr. Igliozzi indicated, are substantially similar to the ones that the planning board did see. Addressed to me dated March 2023. There's one sentence in each that is different. And the sentence is, in mine, it says the applicant has a pending development plan review. And then the other one that Ms. Lichtenberg got, it says that they have to file a development plan review application. So substantially similar information. And I had introduced in my memorandum and before the planning board at the hearing, the reminder about the notice of violation that Mr. Studley received in 2022, telling him, that it never got worked out in 2011 and he needed to do it now. And that was before the planning board as well. So although these actual documents weren't seen by the planning board, I think there's significant connection and I don't have any objection to them being entered into the record. I don't know if that answers your questions. Okay.
No objection from staff.
Second.
Any nays?
Yes, do we need to officially announce we're back in session before we continue?
You did.
I don't think so. Did we? As long as we did it. I hope.
Are we okay? How does the board feel?
Fine.
Okay, for the record.
There you go.
we say that we are now back in session. Minutes. Good. Okay. Colin is at plan.
Aye.
Please, nays at all? Okay. I'm gonna call the young lady back up, if you don't mind. Full name and address.
Do I need to raise my hand?
You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Jessica Lichtenberg of 10 Reservoir Road, Coventry, Rhode Island.
I'll start off with good evening. I was disappointed, but not at all surprised when I read the development plan review, modifications / improvements, specifically the stipulations being non-descriptive and not reflecting the discussions or including amendments made pertaining to the storage of piles of logs and stumps. Oh, I'm sorry. Amendments made pertaining to the storage of piles of logs and stumps, an appropriate buffer, and trucks being parked behind the gate after hours. I received a memorandum. I'll try to go slow. I'm nervous, so I talk fast when I'm nervous. I received a memorandum from Mr. Cronin stating a revised set of plans were submitted that included all of the stipulations that were in the DPR / staff notes available to the public, which also included revisions not listed in the stipulations, specifically the issue regarding piles of logs and stumps and where they would be stored, stating they would now be stored on the industrial one side. I have a question. Are recommendations of commission members included in Mr. Kenny's amendment, usually left out of DPR stipulations, unavailable for public view? This, in my opinion, was a clear error. I believe they should have been listed under the stipulations that require revisions by the applicant because the appeal period ends before the revisions are required to be submitted, which was a major contributing factor for appeal.
Okay,
Thank-
slow up just a little.
I'm sorry, what?
Just slow up just a
Oh, I'm
little.
sorry. I know I speak
Okay.
fast. Thankfully, the applicant was kind enough to add it to his revisions, but I do not believe he was required to do so as it was not listed under the stipulations for revision. And I question if I had not appealed, would it have been added to the revisions at all? This should have been listed in the stipulations for revision and not left for the discretion of the applicant. The DPR states under stipulation section B, quote, "The storage of materials related to the tree service is allowed on general business property," end quote. Please take note of the use of the word materials without any stipulations of where piles of logs, piles of stumps, and firewood can be stored. This statement by itself gives an allowance to use a general business lot as an accessory to a commercial woodlot, which is not permitted. This is a clear error and did not reflect the discussions and amendments of the Planning Commission meeting. The DPR should clearly state that piles of logs and stumps and firewood can only be stored on industrial one property. It should absolutely not state that the storage of materials related to the tree service is allowed on general business property, because it is not an allowance the Planning Department nor the Planning Commission have the right to give. Only equipment relating to the tree service is allowed on general business property, not materials. I am asking the board for the revision of the statement to accurately reflect the schedule of district use and the recommendation of Mr. Reyes and Mr. Kenny's amendment. The DPR states, quote, "Any business machinery / equipment, example, wood chippers during non-business hours to be stored / parked within the existed gated area of the business," end quote. The lack of descriptive language in this statement did not accurately reflect the amendments made at the Planning Commission meeting. I am asking the board to please consider a clear error was made and to revise the statement to accurately reflect the recommendation of Mr. Anderson that trucks and equipment be parked behind the gated area during non-business hours. This was included in Mr. Kenny's amendment made at the Planning Commission meeting. This is important to ensure there is no misinterpretation by myself, the Planning Department, or the applicant of what is and isn't allowed to be parked in the lot after hours. The exit of the parking lot / loading zone. When trucks with trailers and bucket trucks with chippers come to drop off debris or drop off mulch, they have to drop their trailer or their chipper. This is done in the parking lot. They pull in and park in line with the sidewalk. They drop their chipper or trailer, and then they come back to the parking lot to rehitch their chipper or trailer and pull out of the parking lot, most of the time making a left-hand turn towards Tioga Avenue. Some drivers are unable to make the left-hand turn out of the parking lot without driving on the hill of grass in front of my home that was once a nice even slope that is now sunken in the center due to the weight of trucks driving onto it because they cannot make the left-hand turn out of the parking lot exit. And the commercial trucks pulling up my driveway to back into the industrial one exit entrance. The Planning Commission was made aware of this, but did nothing to rectify. I honestly would have been happy with the assurance the applicant would communicate with various drivers and patrons of his business that it was not acceptable to do so, but to ignore the issue altogether was not acceptable. I am asking the board to please consider a clear error was made by omitting anything that would prevent commercial vehicles from driving on my lawn or in my driveway. Coventry zoning ordinance for parking lots 255-1200, section C, location states, quote, "No parking lot or loading facility exclusive of driveways shall be located within 10 feet of a street right-of-way line or 5 feet of a sidewalk," end quote. It also states, quote, "It is the intent of this article that substantially all parking spaces shall be located to the rear or the side of the building. The front yard shall be used primarily for sidewalks and landscaping," end quote. Section F of the same ordinance, screening and or landscaping, quote, "All parking areas shall be screened and or landscaped in accordance with Coventry Ordinance 255-1750, end quote. Section I, wheel blocks, quote, "When a parking lot extends to a property line, sidewalk, or street right-of-way or landscape buffer, wheel blocks or other suitable devices shall be installed to prevent any parked vehicle from extending beyond the parking lot facility setback line," end quote. Please note, there are wheel blocks proposed by the town engineer to protect trees, but not to protect pedestrians and sidewalk from commercial equipment that continually parks along the sidewalk. Coventry zoning ordinance XVII for landscaping 255-1750, parking lots, section A. Quote, "When a parking lot is located adjacent to a public street, alternatives should be considered to reduce the visual impact of the parking lot. Some alternatives are landscape setbacks and landscape berms," end quote. Section B, along the perimeter of the parking lot to reduce its visual impact, part 1, provide a landscape strip around the perimeter of the lot to be planted with shade trees and low shrubs in compliance with Coventry Ordinance 255-1730. A minimum of 1 shade tree per every 40 feet of lot perimeter. Additional shade trees may be necessary to effectively shade/screen the parking lot," end quote. The Planning Commission waived the street tree requirement and allowed a parking lot with no buffer, no landscaping, which is unjust to abutting properties and not supported by the weight of the evidence. This is not solely a parking lot for employee parking, given the historical and continued use of the parking lot as an employee bathroom, employee changing room, a loading and unloading zone, equipment and truck repair site, the storage of commercial vehicles, including commercial trucks that haven't run or moved in years. The parking lot is located solely on the general business side of the property and should not be used as an equipment repair site ever. This is an extremely loud, dusty, and foul-smelling operation, which, to say the very least, is an eyesore, which in turn directly affects the property values and quality of life of abutting properties. I am asking the board to please consider an error was made in the waiving of the street tree requirement and for allowing a commercial parking lot with no buffer whatsoever. These allowances are not supported by the weight of the evidence, given the historical and continued use of the parking lot and the nature of the use of the properties. The DPR states to, quote, "Ensure public safety and to help with screening property from adjacent residentially zoned district. The existing gate on general business lot 116 needs to be closed during non-business hours. In addition, the gate and related sections of fence need to be installed with some type of lattice or tennis tarping to help screening industrial business uses from the nearby residentially zoned district," end quote. For the DPR to state that the gate on the general business side is to, quote, "help with screening industrial business uses" is an absurd statement, being that the actual industrial 1 entrance was left wide open and now has the beautiful view of an industrial grinder with no buffer to help with noise, dust, vibrations, and emissions whatsoever. There are 2 entrances to the properties. The general business side has a gate. The industrial 1 side does not. The open entrance on industrial 1 side is used on Sundays and after hours or any time the general business gate is closed. Various tree services and landscape companies will use this open driveway to drop chips and debris after hours and on Sundays. It is absolutely ridiculous for the DPR to state that the gate is to, quote, "ensure public safety and to help with screening industrial uses," when they've allowed the industrial 1 entrance to be completely open, which allows the use of the properties for dumping during non-business hours. I'm asking the board to recommend that both entrances be gated and screened. I believe this is an error due to the fact that the DPR stipulations state the general business gate in front of my next door neighbor's home is to ensure public safety and to screen industrial uses while leaving the actual industrial one entrance that's in front of my home wide open. A gate at both locations is the only way to ensure compliance with permitted operating hours, to fully ensure public safety, and to help with screening the actual industrial one property uses. The placement of the horizontal grinder with no buffer. The grinder is now placed right next to or on top of the property line between industrial one and general business property, now visible from the industrial one entrance. This is an extremely loud and dust-producing machine that can at times emit a very strong emission smell, causing abutters to be unable to open the windows of their home. The horizontal grinder was on general business property behind the buffer, which somewhat muffled the sound of the grinder's engine. With placing the grinder in the new location with no buffer whatsoever, it is louder than it ever was. Please also consider that the industrial one lot can now run a very loud wood processor while simultaneously grinding mulch. Absolutely no information was submitted by the applicant that shows they can stay within the industrial standards for noise, dust, vibration, odor, and emissions. To ignore the abutting property owner's complaints regarding the industrial standards and how they directly affect the abutter's quality of life, use of their own property, and property values was unjust. Industrial standards testing should have been requested and shown to be within acceptable standards with appropriate buffering of the horizontal grinder from residential property. I'm asking the board to please consider an error was made for not requesting any information be submitted on the ability to stay within the acceptable industrial standards and not requiring any buffer for the horizontal grinder from residential properties. The Planning Commission's lack of referral to the zoning board for a special use permit. In zoning certificate dated June 29th, 2022, states that the industrial one property is a non-conforming use. Coventry zoning ordinance 255-860 for special use permits, quote, the expansion, extension, or alteration of non-conforming uses so as to increase their non-conformity shall require a special use permit from the board, end quote. Coventry zoning ordinance 255-840, section A, states that, quote, a non-conforming use may be continued so long as it remains otherwise lawful and does not cause any adverse impacts to surrounding uses, end quote. A special use permit is required for the industrial one non-conforming use property used as a commercial woodlot for the upgrading of wood processing equipment over the last decade, which has continued to get louder over time, and for the addition of grinding mulch to an already loud and very small non-conforming commercial woodlot. A special use permit is important to ensure that the machinery used on site cannot continue to be upgraded on a non-conforming lot or add more industrial uses that are not listed in the schedule of district use. In general business zoning certificate dated June 29, 2022, states that, quote, the production of mulch, which is not addressed in table 6-1, Coventry ordinance 600.B3 states that the board shall have authority to review proposed use not listed in the schedule. The proposed use shall be subject to a special use permit pursuant to Article 4 and Development Plan Review, subject to Article XVI, end quote. The production of mulch not being listed on the schedule of district use requires a special use permit even for an industrial one property. I question how the production of mulch requires a special use permit as stated in the general business zoning certificate dated June 29th, 2022, suddenly changed to wood manufacturing to the sole benefit of the applicant. The outdoor industrial grinding of wood is an extremely loud, dusty, and odorous and should require a special use permit and not be allowed to fall under the guise of wood manufacturing. This should be considered the expansion or extension of a commercial woodlot, which is exactly what this is. Please also take into consideration the amount of open space on the industrial one property. This is a very small area for firewood processing equipment, 1 to 2 horizontal grinders, Niagara water tankers, storage piles of tree-length logs, piles of stumps, and piles of firewood. When looking at the aerial photo, I question how all of these items could even fit onto the industrial one property. There simply isn't enough room without utilizing the general business property as an accessory to a commercial woodlot, which has been the historical use as stated in the general business zoning certificate. I am asking the board to please consider a procedural error was made when not referring the applicant to the board for a special use permit. The storage of raw single grind wood chips on general business property. The storage of raw single grind wood chips on general business property. This is not bulk landscape supply, as no one purchases them as is, and the chips still need to be ground as they are not yet suitable for mulching. Raw single grind wood chips should also not be able to fall under the guise of accessory to wood manufacturing, because it sets a precedent for general business lots to be used as dump sites for wood chips. Massive piles of raw single grind wood chips do not belong on general business property. I am asking the board to please consider an error was made in the allowance of single grind wood chips on general business property. The DPR states that the plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The 2023 Coventry Comprehensive Plan states that, quote, light industrial uses should not be expanded without careful consideration, as they can have significant impacts on neighboring properties, end quote. I am asking the board to please consider if an error was made in the approval of the proposed uses. The approval of uses without requesting any supportive evidence of the industrial standards being adhered to, while ignoring abutters' complaints regarding the noise, dust, emissions, and outdoor industrial equipment. The granting of a street tree waiver, a commercial parking lot with no landscaping or buffer to sidewalk, a parking lot exit not suitable for the proposed use, the relocation of the horizontal grinders to a location with no buffer, leaving the industrial one entrance open with no gate, in my opinion, could not be described as careful consideration. And in closing, I will say that I have waited 12 years to see any enforcement of town ordinance of these properties. To read the DPR, to find it very clearly did not include specific recommendations and amendments made by commission members was upsetting. The fact that no one who voted to ratify or sign the DPR picked up on any of these errors is concerning, to say the least. The clear errors of the former planning director, who inaccurately wrote the DPR stipulations and gave allowances the planning department nor the planning commission even have the right to give, is an egregious error. And I can only hope this board, after reviewing my statements, will feel compelled to rectify. Thank you.
Okay, this time here, turn it over to our solicitor. Mr. Chairman, may I? Sure. Okay.
Well, I'm visibly perplexed, right? Because I have the reasons for appeal, as you do, that were attached to the appeal, and the argument and memorandum presented tonight doesn't really follow that directly. So I think, right, belt and suspenders. I'll try to cover both, but succinctly.
To address the items that were presented in writing as part of the appeal first,
Agreed.
so that so the record is clear. I
Agreed.
appreciate that.
Okay.
Is
I'll
that
do,
possible?
I'm gonna give it a shot. Okay. Thomas Cronin, 1070 Main Street, Coventry, Rhode Island,
You
for
swear-
the applicant J.W. Studley and Sons.
Okay, you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth from this board?
I do. Okay. So, starting with the appeal that was filed and the reasons, the 11 reasons in support of that appeal. So just gonna go down the list, okay. So number one was lack of descriptive language in the DPR with regard to any wood materials shall not exceed 12 feet. This is a problem due to storage of piles of tree-length logs and stumps being stored in the general business side of the property. I'm sorry, I have general business side of the property. I'll slow down. They are not allowed on the general business side without a special use permit for a commercial woodlot. The use of such non-descriptive language leaves the DPR open to interpretation, leading to continued non-enforcement. So as actually Mr. Lichtenberg addressed, the final plan that we recorded at the direction of the decision did identify the storage of the tree length logs and stumps being stored on the industrial side of the property as directed by the zoning certificates. So I think that issue has been resolved. We have, could I have it's Exhibit L of my memo. It's the final plan recorded in accordance with the decision. Could he put that up there or not do that?
It might be from, it could be back from June.
This was originally scheduled for June 26th.
Can't no worries. Just be easier to understand. But if you looked at the last exhibit in my memorandum, that's the final plan that was recorded with the final decision. And if you looked at that plan, as Ms. Lichtenberg indicated, we did identify an area where the logs and stumps would be stored, and that is on the Industrial 1 property, lot 150. I believe there was one more. Let me check. So, anyway, that's the first issue that was completed. That those materials are not being stored on GB, they're being stored on the Industrial 1, Lot 150. The second point was no information or testing presented by the applicant showing the machines running daily meet industrial standards, example, daily horizontal grinder and wood processor. So the industrial performance standards are reviewed before issuing a building permit for an industrial use, and they're reviewed by the building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer. They're not really an item for the planning board. They're referred to in Article 7, Section 720 of the zoning regulations. This is a situation which has been alluded to, but just to get it out, there was a violation of this property in 2011. They were instructed in order to rectify that to file a DPR, Development Plan Review, with the town of Coventry. One was started but never completed. And in 2022, that was discovered and we did file one. So that's what's before the board right now. But this use has been in existence for many years, and before 1980, when the zoning ordinance was enacted, and it's a pre-existing use. I wouldn't say it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, but it's a pre-existing use. So there was no need to review the industrial standards, and it was not raised by the planning board. Number 3, lack of descriptive language in the DPR as to any business machinery, equipment, for example, wood chippers during non-business hours to be stored/parked within the existing gated area of the business. It is still unclear what is allowed to be parked in the lot after business hours, leaving the DPR to be up for interpretation, which only means another decade of zoning department non-enforcement. So the hearing, multi-part hearing before the planning board, focused on the heavy machinery used in the business. An industrial wood processor, horizontal grinder, which is on site every day, used most days by J.W. Studley and Son, and a larger wood processor, horizontal grinder, which is brought in several times a year on a limited basis, which is owned by Wall Tree Service, to clean up things that are too big for the processor on site. Those were the items that we were addressing. The planning board didn't really ask so much about the other mobile equipment and such, except that they didn't want it left in front of the gate when the business was closed, and that's what it says here. So I'm not sure what they didn't address every piece of machinery. They addressed the two large ones. And they did say that the other equipment should be stored behind the gate. So I'm not sure, there was no investigation into what other equipment or anything like that. It's not required that vehicles be parked behind, screens or gates. It's a parking lot. They're parked there for the weekend. I'm not sure what the ambiguity is. So I don't really have a strong response to that, other than trucks and wheeled equipment is parked in the parking lot, in front of the screening and in front of the gate when the business is closed. Number 4, lack of referral to the zoning board for a special use permit. So this one actually appears in both and does require some explanation in order to understand what has occurred here. So the business, Studley Wood, has been at this site since before zoning was put into place. But there are 2 lots. One, lot 15, is an industrial lot, and 116. If you're looking at the business, 116 is on the right, 115 is on the left. A little easier to understand. The house is actually on the industrial lot. I mean, everybody drives by this place on a regular basis. So as part of the hearing, the planning board required me to go and get an updated zoning certificate from the staff of the town. You see it in my package, dated March 23rd, 2023, I believe it is. And Ms. Lichtenberg has a similar document dated from the summer before. They say is substantially the same thing. And we rearranged the operation, as you see on the plan, which is the last exhibit in my package, so that at the direction of the town, the storage for this business occurs on the general business lot, and the active work, the wood chippers and such, are on the industrial lot. So such that the lot, the uses are in conformity with the zoning for each lot. So this is how the planning board resolved the issue. The one other thing that I would add to that is that as a result of the actions of the planning board requiring those zoning certificates and then having me rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic so that the uses match the zoning for the lot, is that we actually decreased the intensity of the use. Mr. Studley, admittedly, before these hearings began, was using that horizontal grinder on the general business lot. And as a result of these hearings and the demands of the planning board, now it's on the industrial lot where it belongs, right? So he's decreased the intensity, or he's decreased the nonconformity of his use. So I'm not sure why he would need to go and get a special use permit under those circumstances. Number 5, DPR states that the daily use horizontal grinder as 700 horsepower without ever receiving any documentation proving the machine used daily is 700 horsepower and may be less and should be proven with the appropriate documentation before being written into an approved DPR. So you see in my memorandum that we had Derek Anepo, the president of Warwick Tree Service, come to the second hearing. He provided non-party witness testimony as to the operations at the site, and he also identified the horizontal grinder that was there on the site each day used by Mr. Studley, as well as his own horizontal grinder, and he identified the horsepower of each. So we presented evidence to the board from a non-party witness as to the horsepower of each of these machines, what they were used for, how often they were used, and whether they could be used safely in the new spaces where we were putting them. So I think the planning board demanded and received the information asked for. Moving on to number 6, the project is not light industrial and is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. No, I don't need to beat a dead horse. This use was in place before the adoption of the zoning or the first comprehensive plan. It is, it's an unusual situation. You go down Reservoir Road, on the right-hand side, Mr. Confrida has the general business zone on his nursery. Then there's one more general business lot, which is the wood chip pile and mulch pile of this business. And then from there to the end of Reservoir Road along the right-hand side, it's industrial use. On the other side of the street, R20. I mean, it's an unusual situation for sure. But that's accurate. That's what it is. So everybody has to live with that. Number 7, at the March 29th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting, Mr. Kenny voted to approve the DPR. Mr. Anderson seconded with the stipulations of trucks parked behind the gate and buffer and being neighborly, in quotes, and stated he would like to see an appropriate landscape buffer. Mr. Reyes stated he would like to see the material, finished and unfinished product, and what side it should be stored on. And Mr. Kenny amended his motion to include Mr. Reyes and Mr. Anderson's comments, but somehow they did not make it into the finalized DPR. So I have, I guess, 2 responses to that. They did make it into the planning board decision. Ms. Lichtenberg doesn't think that they're specific enough. They're there about what Mr. Studley can and cannot do and where things belong. But she would like to see it with more specificity. I don't think that's really clear error. And the final plan again shows some of the information, like Mr. Ray's wanting to see where the material, finished, unfinished product, and what side, he means which lot, they would be stored on. Number 8, raw single grind wood chips are not bulk landscape supply and should not be stored. No, excuse me, I apologize. I want to start right over. Number 8, raw single grind wood chips are not bulk landscape supply and should be stored on the industrial one side of the property along with the piles of logs and stumps. All that should be stored on the GB side is finished product, trucks, and equipment. So there was conversation about whether the wood chips are landscape materials or not, right? At the planning board, Ms. Lichtenberg argued that they were not, and we, Mr. Studley, and the folks on his side argued that they were, it's chopped up wood, it's wood chips. And the planning board made a decision that they were wood chips, that they had been processed in some way, and that they could be stored in the general business side. And I think to have the zoning board question that decision that was literally made by, each side differed, and the planning board was the one who made the decision. So it'd be difficult to see how the zoning board could overstep the planning board on that issue. They made that call. That was in dispute, and they made that decision. Moving on. Number 9. This is the expansion of a commercial woodlot. This is not wood manufacturing. This is organic waste recycling and is an extension of a commercial woodlot. The noise, vibration, dust, and debris caused by this extension of a commercial tree lot has not been tested and is in no way considered light industrial, nor would any commercial tree lot be considered light industrial. Not to beat the dead horse, but this is not a new use on this property. We're not adding anything. We did move some things around at the request of the planning board and the zoning certificate to make sure that whatever operation we were undertaking was on the properly zoned lot of the 2 lots. So we did move things around, but we're not adding any uses here. It's a pre-existing use. Mr. Anepo did testify as to the safety and use. He used the word throw of a horizontal grinder and how that differed from a tub grinder. The planning staff had inadvertently used the word tub grinder in their staff report, and that caused quite a bit of controversy at the planning board meeting. But Mr. Anepo, identified the difference between a tub grinder and a horizontal grinder, explained the dangers of a tub grinder, and indicated the horizontal grinder was a more safe operation and better suited for this location. So those are and Mr. Confrida, the next door neighbor, appeared to confirm that his mom, Anna, owns lot 116 and leases it to Mr. Studley, which was for some reason in dispute after the first meeting. And also confirmed that since Mr. Studley began the use of the current horizontal grinder, he had not had any incidents at all with regard to wood being misplaced on his property. So this is the evidence that was presented to the planning board, contrary to the statements of Ms. Lichtenberg in her appeal. With regard to number 10, the DPR's new placement of horizontal grinders. The grinders historically were used on the general business side of the property for years behind a buffer made of 6-foot arborvitae spaced about 5 feet apart. They are now used practically on top of the property line between general business and industrial 1 with absolutely no buffer whatsoever to help prevent noise, dust, and vibration. The DPR states that objectionable features are generally located towards the back of the lot. This is not true, proven by the open placement of the large horizontal grinders placed in the only location with no buffer. So in addressing that, I turned back to the rearrangement of the use on the site to conform with the zoning certificates from the town of Coventry as requested by the planning board. They wanted the grinder on the industrial lot. We agreed to do that. We showed them on the plan where those would be. They were in agreement. It was a request, and it's not as if the issue was not addressed. This is in direct reaction to what they wanted to see, where those grinders are. So to say that these things were not considered or that they were wrongly decided it was decided at the discretion of the planning board, I guess is what I'm saying. The number 11, the lack of gate on the exit that is used all day on Sundays and anytime the entrance gate is closed It is used as an entrance for landscape and tree services to dump their debris during non-business hours. Ms. Lichtenberg brought this up at the hearing before the planning board. They considered it. They did not decide to include that as a stipulation. There's not really too much in the record about why they made that decision, but it was an issue that was considered by the board and not included in their decision. So that's a brief response to the 11 points brought up in the actual appeal. And to be fair to Ms. Lichtenberg, a couple of those issues were resolved by the plan that we recorded with the decision, which she didn't have an opportunity to see when she filed her appeal. She's correct in that regard. So that is, I understand why some of this stuff she said when it was resolved by the plan that we recorded. I would like to briefly, with the board's permission, address some of the issues brought up by Ms. Lichtenberg today, which are not included in the 11 reasons for her appeal. Is it okay to proceed with that, Mr. Chairman?
I agree with the solicitor.
Yeah, I think, I could stand up here and stamp my feet and say it's unfair, but I think we'd rather just deal with the record, and I'll tell you as I go along where I think it's unfair. Okay, so let's just get right into it. So the first page of her notes really deal with the fact that we put the storage of logs and stumps on the industrial 1 property, even though they didn't put that in the decision, which I don't have a response to. That's what they told us to do during the hearing. That's what we did. I don't have any control over what they put in their decision. On the second page of her memo, the second item she brings up, the storage of materials related to the tree service is allowed on general business property. She objects to the use of the word materials. I don't really have an opinion on whether that word is proper or not. So we had a direct, somewhat confrontational discussion about what mulch is, how you make mulch, what wood chips are, how you make wood chips, where the stumps and logs come from. And there were times when it got a little, people were using the wrong terms, but in general, it was decided by the board, really on the recommendation of the staff, that the wood that had been processed, those materials, which they referred to as landscape materials, which I don't know what that means. Doesn't have any meaning in the regulations, but the wood chips and the mulch were items which had been processed, and that those could be stored on general business. And when you look at our plan, we have an area described for wood chips and an area identified for mulch on the GB. I don't think that there's any lack of clarity in the decision. It directly is reflected on the plan. The plan is recorded along with the decision. They should be read together, I guess. But materials doesn't seem ambiguous to me in that regard. The next item, I again addressed earlier, any business machinery equipment should be stored, parked within the existing gated area of the business when non-business hours. She would like to see that further explained or clarified in the decision. That's at the discretion of the planning board. It accurately describes what they meant. She seems disappointed in the words that they chose or the length of the description, but there's no disagreement on what the decision says and what should happen. I think she is maybe either looking to the past as to what has happened over the years, or is speculating about the future. The decision itself is fairly clear, and it's accurately reflected in the plan. The exit of parking, the exit of trucks from the parking lot and the loading zone was an issue that was not discussed at planning. One of the planning board members expressed some restrained outrage over the blocking of Reservoir Road by the wood trucks in the morning, especially when school's in session. And Michael Beard was present at the hearing that day. And he came to the microphone and said that that was him. It wasn't Mr. Studley, that it was his practice when the light turned red to stop the traffic and let his trucks out, because that was safer than having them interweave into the traffic. But these other issues were not addressed at the planning board hearing and not considered as part of the decision, and I don't think they ought to be considered tonight. The parking and loading facility from the Coventry zoning ordinance. So the actual ordinance with regard to parking is not addressed at planning, not brought up by the board, not brought up by the objectors or anyone in the audience. There were discussions about the parking lot, what it should look like, who should use it and when, but not the actual ordinance with regard to how big the parking spaces should be, whether there ought to be wheel blocks on the street side or anything. The town engineer and the DPW director were, as Ms. Lichtenberg indicates, concerned that excessive use would kill the arborvitae, which was providing some screening, and they did address that. But the actual ordinance was not addressed, and that's because the use was there. That's how they use it. You know, that this isn't a new business coming into town. I really can't stress that enough, and it comes up many times in the hearing that, you know, Mr. Studley received a violation. He had to file a development plan review to show what he was doing and record what he was doing with the town on this site. And that's what we tried to do. And when there was disagreement with the board about whether that was appropriate or not, we adjusted our use, his actual operation to conform with their requests. That's how this went. We didn't come in with a new plan for a new business or blank sheet, so to speak. We tried to take what was there and make it work. And so that, you know, that's the result you see is because of that approach. Similarly, the landscaping zoning ordinance is not brought up at the planning board hearing. And I did make a request for the waiver of street tree requirement because the area in question is paved. I mean, it's a parking lot. In front of the house is a parking lot. There's no reasonable opportunity along Reservoir Road to do what the zoning ordinance would require for a new business. The next item brought up is the gate, and we've addressed that. And I would just say that this board should not substitute its judgment for the judgment of the planning board with regard to their decision to have a gate and have that gate locked and latticed on one side, but not another. The next item on page 8 of Ms. Lichtenberg's memorandum is the placement of the horizontal grinder with no buffer. As I've indicated, it was placed where it is placed at the direction of the planning board to conform with the zoning of lot 115 and lot 116, so that it is on lot 115, the industrial lot. Any indications in Ms. Lichtenberg's memorandum that the decision is unjust or ridiculous, you know, ought to be ignored by this board. We addressed the special use permit question on page 10 of our memorandum. On page 11, she raises a different issue for a special use permit, that the industrial one lot 115, is too small for the operation, and its direct proximity to the general business lot blurs the line between the two zones. If you look at the plan, one of the items requested by the board, but not included in their decision, but we did include in the plan, is the line between lot 115 and lot 116 has been marked by surveyor's marks, so that the town zoning official, or town building official can go onto that lot and see the line, and they'll know whether those grinders are on the general business side or if they're on the industrial side where they belong. They'll be able to, to see whether the logs and stumps are stored in the proper location. The board requested that. We agreed. There are surface level survey markers periodically in the front, back, and middle, showing where that line is, so that there's no confusion. This application for a DPR results from complaints of Ms. Lichtenberg, and for her to now say that she's unhappy with the resolution that the planning board reached in conformity with the zoning regulations, certainly raises an eyebrow to me. But moving along, the planning board made a decision on a dispute between the parties that the wood chips are processed material and can be stored on a general business property, and you should not overturn their discretion. There's questions about the comprehensive plan, but we mentioned earlier that this is a pre-existing use. There's criticism of the planning board's ignoring abutters' complaints and not giving the matter careful consideration. I guess my sore feet would argue otherwise. So a full pre-application hearing, a site visit, public hearing in January, which lasted a good amount of time and was full of histrionics, and then an additional full public hearing with new plans, new witnesses, new zoning certificates in March would belie any accusation by the appellant that this matter did not receive careful consideration. I would estimate that I spent no less than 6 hours standing before this board with regard to this development plan review application. And finally, on the last page of her memorandum, she expresses disappointment over the historical enforcement of the zoning regulations on this lot, which again, the zoning enforcement officer is the one that brought me and my client before the planning board and now you. So can't say that they took no action, although, it's any criticism of what has been done would fall under the discretionary decision-making power of the planning board. So that was an awful lot of stuff, and some of it superficial given the volume. So I'm happy to answer any questions from the board and point to the record if you need me to substantiate some of the statements I've made. Thank you.
Turn it over to the source. So, members of the board, I don't know if you're gonna allow anyone else to speak, to see if anyone else wants to speak, the applicant has any comments. I think you need to wrap all that up. and then the board can start its deliberation. I think you should make sure there's nobody else that wants to speak, or if the applicant wants to comment. They can't speak. Zoom can't speak. Oh, that's right. This is, a hearing. That's right.
And for the record, there's no one attending on Zoom tonight.
And there's nobody here else in the audience to speak on.
So is there any other, does anybody have any other comment? If you want to let the applicant be more comment.
Sure, please.
Just really quickly, just following up on what Mr. Cronin said, the parking lot is absolutely not paved. It is crushed asphalt and dirt underneath. And just to be petty, it's not enough crushed asphalt. So it's just basically, it's not enough crushed asphalt. It's very thinly spread, just comes out into the road. Another thing that Mr. Cronin just stated that, I'm sorry, the landscaping and buffer wasn't brought up, and it was specifically brought up at both meetings by myself. And another thing I happened to notice was that he mentioned something about how the planning commission had decided that the wood chips and the mulch are processed. So that makes them able to be on general business side. My argument will always say, so is the firewood, but that's not allowed over there either. You know, so it really, it's splitting hairs, but it really doesn't make any sense to me. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
So members of the board, you've got a couple of things, right? If you have questions of either the applicant or Mr. Cronin, you can raise them. You can do a question.
Can't ask questions.
Can't you ask
We
questions?
couldn't- The last one, they said we couldn't ask questions.
We have
On an
to
appeal.
just look at what's.
But I'm talking about questions of clarification of what they just said.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Thank
mean
you.
questions
Not
about going back to, can't start questioning beyond the record.
I got you.
But so if you don't have any of that, then the next, I think the board would want to proceed. I think you should proceed in the same order in which things were presented, so that a decision can be written accordingly. So I don't know if the board wants to go through these things one at a time. The board wants to talk about these things. The board wants to continue this to another night to gather all this information together. Any one of those options is available. It's really about, I don't know what the board is sensing. I don't know, I don't know if the board has any questions about the concept of development plan review that was talked about. I don't know. Does the board have any questions about that process to me?
Well,
Before we get
we're
into-
basically trying to decide if planning made a mistake on any of their decisions. Am I correct? We're not.
And,
Let's say
and to
this.
that point, I think I think we have to take the position that we look at the 11 points that were raised in the appeal. And let's start with number one, just to kind of, Ms. Lynchburg says, the lack of language in the DPR about, quote, any wood material shall not exceed 12 feet. And she talks about this is difficult to know where it's going to be stored and will there be a designation? Well, you heard Mr.
At that point,
Cronin's response, which is part of the record, which was mandated by the planning. board. Like the planning board said, you shall record a map that, I'm just pointing this out, what the planning board said, I'm not telling you, that says you will only have stumps and wood on the industrial side, you'll have the wood, horizontal wood grinder on the industrial side, and you may only store wood chips on the general business side. That's the answer that theoretically is one answer to the record and this allegation. So when the planning board made that determination, were they clear? If you think they were clear, then you would make that ruling. I think. you
I
have
think
to
they
go through-
spelled it right out, to be honest with you.
I think what?
They spelled it right out.
I'm just pointing out that one. So that's, I think you should take each one of them accordingly and say, do you think that's a mistake? Do you think they made any procedural mistakes? You know, you didn't really, I'm looking at the list of arguments here, and I think we're gonna have to be very careful. I'm not so sure, but I would certainly be willing to listen to an argument. I don't see any arguments of procedural mistakes here. The one procedural mistake that seems to be raised is that the planning board should have referred it to you for a special use permit. But you heard the testimony, and the record says what the planning board did in January, they said, we want you to go get a zoning certificate so we know what the zoning officer says. Do you need a special use permit? And then in response to that, they got the 2 zoning certificates saying what they could do on the industrial side and what they could do on the general business side. And that's why the rearrangement process began under the DPR.
But as far as a special use permit, it was already grandfathered in, correct?
Well, that's, again, these are the arguments that are being made. I'm giving you, with regard to the procedural argument that Ms. Lichtenberg's saying, is that the planning board made a mistake not referring it to you for a special use permit. The planning board did not ignore that issue. They timed out. They took a timeout in January and said that issue was raised. You get us certificates proving what you can do on that property and show us either one of 2 things. That you're gonna do what the zoning certificate says, or you're gonna go to the zoning. That's was their response to that. But so do you think the planning board made a procedural error in not referring it to you and relying on the zoning certificate? That's the only, again, that's one of the procedurals. I think you gotta take each one of these things, we gotta talk about them, and then you gotta be clear in your mind. And I'm not trying to persuade you one way or the other, but I'm
totally understand.
telling you
Just trying
what
to-
the evidence is, right?
Trying to plan how we should do this. Should
Right,
we
and I
do
think we should go right down these
one at a
items.
time and take a consensus on each one.
I
and then
really
move
think you
forward?
should, and then make sure it's clear in your mind what was said,
Okay,
okay?
yep, let's
So-
do that.
alright, so
And
the
I'm gonna have
first one-
you set it up.
So again, on the first one, you heard Miss Lynchburg's argument that wasn't clear enough to determine where the stumps and wood would be stored on the industrial and the wood chips on the general business. In response to that argument, I'm repeating myself, you heard the applicant present to you that the planning board mandated in their decision that you give us a map and specifically provided that stumps and logs would be stored on the industrial side for wood manufacturing, the chips, and the chips would be stored. I mean, that's simplistically, that's what they said. So
When
if
is
you
that
think
suppo-
that's not clear, then you should rule in favor of Ms. Lichtenberg on that argument. If you think it was clear based upon what the planning board said and did, then you would rule in favor of the planning board on
Okay.
number 1.
When was that supposed to be in effect? The map, is that supposed to be accurate as of today?
Right, well, it was supposed to be recorded. Upon this decision, the planning board's decision required them to record a map that specified where that would be done. During the discussion, if you were to read the minutes,
Yeah, I did.
it says specifically, you shall do this on the industrial side and you shall do X, Y, Z, essentially horizontal chipper on the industrial side, stumps on the industrial side, logs on the industrial side, wood chips on the general business side.
Right, you will go there today and the logs are on the general business side.
I didn't, if that's true, then that's a matter of violation. That's not a matter of whether the planning board.
Right, okay.
So
That's right.
again, let me just,
Wait, I'm taking a record.
let me
so
just, I'm sorry,
Ms. Dianati said something.
I
couldn't hear her.
apologize.
I don't know what he said.
I just wanted to point out that that's not important. Might be a zoning violation, but
Right.
that's not what we're discussing.
Ten-
We're discussing whether or not the planning board made a mistake,
Okay. gotcha.
not if
Not if he's not.
not if he's
Right.
not following what he's supposed to do. That would be another move.
And Mr.
Correct.
Iannotti is raising a very important point. Part of Ms. Lynchburg's argument is there may be violations in the future, or there may be a violation of some other code now. None of that is relevant for your
Correct.
consideration.
As long
Uh,
as she understands that's.
well, she may or may not. I want you to understand it.
Okay.
I want you to understand that a violation now or in the future is not what's being discussed.
Correct.
Is this planning decision in error?
Gotcha.
If the planning decision is an error, then you rule in favor of the appellant. If you find something in the planning decision that's an error, if you don't find an error in decision, the fact that somebody doesn't violates a decision, if that's true, and people just said that just now, and I don't know that to be true, then zoning enforcement needs to go out there and enforce the decision. That's not your job, right? You don't go out with a pad and a pen, right? So I just think you should do that. There's 11 items listed.
Yeah, just, we're at number one. First one.
And so I
it's
think you should
spelled
talk
out,
about
you
that.
said it,
Yeah.
on what goes on what side. And our solicitor has, so I believe, in my opinion, you can each have your own opinion, I believe that planning board did not make a mistake. No. On number one. I agree with you. You can vote, so it's just us.
No, I don't see any, there is.
I'm hearing people can't vote, so
Right here.
who are the,
The two
you should-
outside guys.
all right, so you should announce for the record who's here, who can be voting. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, who's gonna vote is Keith is gonna vote. I myself will vote. Russ will vote. Ed will vote. And Russ.
But I would suggest that only those members deliberate and weigh in on the discussion.
But my opinion, see, I just general sense disagree with you, because what if one of us can't be, here and vote, and their opinions matter on what's being said?
Well, are you assuming there's going to be a no vote tonight? Is that what you're assuming?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm assuming. But again, that's up to the board. That's not up to me.
All right. Well, I think what we would have to do in that situation, first of all, it's good that they're here now. And if we get to that point, then we would ask for their opinions prior to their vote. If that really happens, if the 5 members,
I do know I'm not gonna be here next.
you're not going to be here next
See,
week.
there we go. See,
All right.
that's just it. That's why I'm saying, I think they should participate. So therefore, their vote, and if they got questions, they should be able to answer. They should be able to bring them up.
My concern is that non-voting members would be influenced voting members. Non-voting members would be influenced voting members. And so that's my concern. And
Just make a note, I won't be here next month either. So there's 2 of us not gonna be here, so you're down to 5. So you gotta vote on it.
you need, and by the way, Mr. Chairman, we need 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5 that are present, right?
All right, let's go through the.
Let's see where it leads.
Yeah, see where it leads.
Let's,
Okay, let's go through it. So the first one, I don't see where there's a member on the board that disagrees on the first one on how it's spelled out and the plan and what's to go where. I don't foresee. Does anybody have a question on that? Does anybody, feel that that wasn't, directed and spelled out? I thought it was very clearly spelled out.
I agree.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah.
Russ?
Yes.
Okay, Keith. Okay,
And for the record, the objection in number 1 is saying that the storage of the logs and the stumps would not be allowed in the general business under these circumstances. And the planning board agreed with that and put that into the
because they
decision.
did it after she,
Right.
so.
So they did agree, may disagree on the outcome, but they did agree that that had to be separated.
Right.
So then number 2, again, no information or testing regarding the machines with regard to industrial standards. That's obviously you heard what Ms. Lichtenberg's alleging, that that's a error of law. You heard the applicant indicate that there was testimony by a third party about the machinery. There was testimony in the record as you
Of the
recall,
horsepower and
that
so
the
on.
machinery that was being used was about 700 horsepower, and that was going to be the amount of horsepower. Now, how it operates and the standards, they didn't get into that other
We
than,
actually did discuss that. He said that one of them.
I
was
saw
safer
that.
than the other.
but they didn't make it part of their decision and say it was or was not. I think the applicant, I mean, the appellant, the appellee or respondent has indicated that any kind of violation of industrial standard of the operation of the machinery would be a function of the permitting process by a building inspector. And it really wouldn't be a planning board function, so.
I don't see,
So I
I
don't see what,
don't see planning made a mistake on that.
no,
either.
because they brought out, I agree, testimony. Okay.
Uh,
Next.
The number three, again, they talk about descriptive language about any business machinery, wood chippers during non-business hours. This, I believe, and I'm not really sure, the decision, there was some discussion by both parties about whether this included or didn't include trucks. But I thought I heard the respondent indicating that there was a list of things and it said example, wood chippers, and may not have said the word trucks, but clearly that would have to be inside the gates after hours. If I misheard, I can still speak, but I think that the discussion was brought up and they gave a list. The planning board's decision says that any business machinery, equipment, example, wood chippers during non-business. Now, they didn't say the word trucks. If that's a distinction that has some importance to this board, then you could indicate the decision should include trucks. If that seems to be a point of contention, I wasn't sure that it was. Thought I heard Mr. Cronin said that was also being stored behind the fence because that comment was adopted was referred to by Mr. Anderson and seconded by Mr. Kenny in the minutes on March 29th. So they were discussing trucks about also being in that area. They didn't say the word truck. I don't know if that's,
Well, I know there's also a resident there that drives a truck daily.
I think they were talking about business, equipment, machinery.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't know.
Did I misunderstand you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I clearly said, the trucks can be parked.
Out in front of the building?
In the parking, but that the equipment needs.
So that's a point of, you can, obviously, if you're gonna list on one person, you have to list the other. But that's a point of contention. So I misheard him. I'm just telling you that that's a point of contention between the two parties. Are trucks, did the planning board include trucks, exclude trucks? And if they did not include trucks in this decision, is that some sort of error? I don't know.
I don't
think it would
believe
be
it'd be
common
an
sense.
error. Because there's a residence there.
Well, are we talking, is this for the general business lot or the industrial? Because the residence is on the.
They don't make a
They
distinction.
don't make, okay.
They're separated uses, but
She would like to speak.
What my intent was that I want the DPR to match what the actual amendments and recommendations of the board were. And the DPR does not do that. Mr. Anderson specifically said trucks and equipment. You can watch it online, you can read the transcript. That's what he said. Along with the storage of wood. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me how it just gets flip-flopped back and forth. It was very clear what they said, and Mr. Kenny amended them. And then when I read the DPR, what was actually available for me to see, which apparently is different from, I guess, everybody else's got to see. It would have been nice for me to be able to see that the logs and stumps were stored where the commission said they were gonna be, but that's not what the document said. I wouldn't have wasted $700 if the DPR reflected the actual statements of the commission, but it absolutely did not. And that's all I have.
Well, I gotta address that. The DPR demanded a plan be recorded, right, be recorded, showing this, showing.
Does the
this-
plan
it show, you have it in front of you. It does show that. I think her point is that she would have liked to see the plan right away when the decision was issued. I guess that's the distinction, but I can't answer that. That's not what they said.
I did read that in the bottom of the DPR, but the problem with that statement is that it doesn't make any sense. Why would your appeal period end before the revisions made? Because the revisions aren't reflected in the DPR. That's some sort of under the table conversation that everybody else had that I wasn't privy to. That's not, all I get to see is the DPR. So whatever's listed in the stipulations, that's all that would be on the new map, right? That's what any member of the general public would think. That is a clear procedural error. It's wrong. I wouldn't have wasted my money or wasted everyone's time if those things were written correctly, reflected the, what was actually said. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me how.
Okay, excuse me, but on the industrial, that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
On the what?
On the industrial. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can't restrict it in the industrial.
We agree. I apologize. Mr. Crowe, as part of this process, the applicant agreed to, conform to the business hours, in, Coventry zoning regulations, 7 to 7, 7 to 5 on Saturdays, none on Sunday. That was an agreement. It's
But
in the.
that's not in the industrial. Industrial is industrial, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
We agreed to limit our activity in this way. It's in the decision. That for both lots. We agreed to that.
Okay.
Got a question? Yeah, just go spot on.
Mr. Solicitor,
Well,
I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused now. This lady is stating that she's seen the plan, and was that after it was made official, or?
Well, the decision was recorded, the decision was recorded on, they have the date on May 1st of 2023, and demanded that the plan be recorded. I don't know.
Did the plan get changed after the decision? Because that's kind of like what she's.
So it got created because of the decision.
Okay.
The plan got created because of this.
Right, it was changed to reflect the decision, and it was recorded June 16th, 2023.
So what she's seen originally is actually different from.
Well,
plan.
the plan that we brought to that hearing is not this plan.
Because you just had to make the decisions and put it all together.
Well, we
I
won
gotcha.
some, we lost some, and
Okay,
this map
I
reflects
understand.
that.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that the decision of the board does, provide stipulations in writing and notations that were supposed to be on the plan, and they are in writing. I don't know if they were clear enough. Ms. Litchfield seemed to indicate that these are not clear enough to demonstrate that they would be reflected on the plan. I guess the question is there something else reflected on the plan that's not on this list? And I don't know the answers to that. But I would have thought the plan would have been revised to conform with this list, not to add to the list.
Correct.
That's what I would think. So saying you didn't see the plan is not the same as saying the planning board didn't put the provisions that had to be on the plans. So you have a right to appeal this decision. as opposed to, I guess her argument is that she couldn't make a decision on appealing this until she saw the plan. I don't know. That's not something that I'd have to see what's so different about what's not on the plan what's on the plan versus this list. Is there something on that plan that's not on this list? And I would think, that's something, that's the only question I would have.
The plan was done after the signature? Yes, yes, sorry. Okay, the
I guess-
plan was made up.
Let me rephrase this. The plan that was presented to the planning board had the information, most of the information on this plan. As a result of the 2 hearings, the site visit, the planning board said, in addition to what you've done here, we want you to do the following. We want you to record a plan that has a notation of the existing gate will be closed between non-business hours. The specifications of the screening material, where it will be located, the existing gate-related fence segments, a notation on the plan prohibiting a tub grinder, a notation on the plan where the rented horizontal grinder will be allowed on those various times, and the maximum horsepower and the hours of operation. A notation on the plan related to equipment, machinery will be parked and stored inside the gated area during non-business hours. Based upon the engineer's review, a detailed specification, business-related debris may be tracked from the site onto the public right-of-way. The sidewalk and Reservoir Avenue shall be cleaned in a timely manner. Installation of wheel blocks for parking spaces to prevent impact on the arborvitae's located between the parking and the landscape blocks. So they said, change your plan to add those items in 7. My understanding is they added them, and they added those items, and then they recorded the plan. So these items are on that, these are now on that plan. Is there something else on there?
Sorry, it's a little awkward. This is the one. Okay. This is the one here.
Is this your exhibit?
It is.
Okay.
And, on the notes, on the left-hand border.
There they are.
Yeah. There are the list of items, specifically the ones Mr. Leo just read.
Number 7.
7, yeah, okay. The only thing that is, not on that list so you asked what changed in the plan, the proposed unfinished material log area and the installation of granite bounds along the boundary line between the 2 lots.
Which has been added.
Those have been added in addition to those.
What was stipulated, okay.
Those were requested by the planning board, but they didn't end up in that list.
Okay, well, that answers that.
Well, I just wanted to make it clear to the board that this isn't a plan that was created after. This was a plan that was heavily discussed, and items 7 on the left-hand side of the plan on the notes was demanded by the planning board to be added. Everything else, other than those 2 things that Mr. Cronin just stated, was presented to the board and was operating. So they were looking at this plan and demanding these notes. None of the configurations on these plans, the parking spots or the property line stuff, that was all before the board at the time. That was all before the board at the time. Okay. That's why the plan is dated October 13th, 2022, because I don't think any of the engineering of the plan changed. That's why I asked that question. Okay. So it's a good point by Ms. Lichtenberg if this plan had never been created, but this plan was created at the time.
What number are we on here?
I brought that up. That was number 3. So I guess the board has to, before we move on to 3, is the board satisfied that that this plan, with the 7 notes in the right-hand side of this plan, which come verbatim from the decision, was sufficient information for the applicant? He's saying without this plan, but she had this plan, but not recorded. She had it without those 7 notes, but she had the 7 notes
Yeah.
were in this decision.
So that's not.
All right, so the
wasn't-
7 notes were separated and then they were incorporated on the
The
plan.
plan.
Okay, so it was,
So the
I
question,
have no complaints with doing it like that, adding it to it. I think it spells it out.
I agree.
And you agree? Mark? Russ?
I agree.
Okay, we agree on that. Next one.
The lack of referral to the zoning board special use permit, again,
Doesn't apply.
this is a similar argument, that we started with our discussion about a procedural error. And the response to that is the planning board, in January, told the applicant that they needed to either go, get zoning certificates and comply with zoning certificates, or you would have to go to the zoning board and get a special use permit. So this issue was discussed by the planning board, and the applicant was sent away, and the applicant spent the next 3 months deciding whether they could reconfigure the lots to comply with the zoning certificates or apply for a special use permit. And they reconfigured. So was the planning board wrong in relying on the zoning certificate? Were they required to send them to a special use permit when that
No,
zoning?
because it
pre-
confirms to.
Pre-zoning, am I correct? Well, that's one issue. That's not the argument she's making here. And number 4, she's saying that she's not talking about, she's saying that the operation required a special use permit. The applicant relocated the operation so that the operation wouldn't require a special use permit by getting zoning certificates that demonstrated that what they were doing on each lot was valid. And they presented that to the zoning. And by the way, the planning board doesn't refer to you anyway. Right? If the planning board had decided that a special use permit was required, they would have granted the DPR subject to a special use permit.
Correct.
They don't refer it to you. They have no authority to refer it to you. They just make recommendations. If a special use permit is required, that's determined by the zoning official who says, I'm not giving you a building permit. You got to go get a special use permit. So that's a different, they don't refer it to you. They make a recommendation upon an application. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But they did refer the applicant to get a zoning certificate in this case because of the issue. So the question is, do you think that they were wrong to do that? Or do you think they did something wrong by, they should have referred this for a special use permit? That's a
The
right.
young lady would like to speak.
We're simply going by the zoning certificates. The zoning certificate clearly states that the processing of mulch is not listed in the schedule of district use and that it would require a special use permit. It says that on the general business zoning certificate, but that would also apply in industrial 1 because it's not on the schedule of district use. And somehow between October and September, somehow it changed from not being listed and requiring a special use permit, which the zoning certificate that I've submitted says, to wood manufacturing. So I don't know where that came from or why that came from, but the zoning certificate states that it is not the production of mulch is not a approved use and needs a special use permit. No matter what zoning you're already, it needs one. It's not listed.
The zoning certificate says that you need a special use permit to make mulch in the general business zone. Everything after that is commentary by Ms. Lickman. Thanks.
And I state for the record, the zoning certificate for lot 115 which is industrial one, the zoning certificate says that the use as a commercial woodlot predates the adoption of the zoning ordinance and will be considered a legal pre-existing non-conforming use. That's got to do with the manufacture of the wood chips or mulch. You know, whether you want to call it mulch or wood chips, let's just say wood chips, because I think mulch includes dyeing them or another step. There was some discussion about that.
Starts off as wood chips after it's ground up and then ground up more to make it mulch.
Okay. And-
Ultimately starts with the three.
And the zoning certificate for the general business says you would have to get a special use permit to in order to manufacture, you know, to conduct a woodlot. But the storage of material, including the zoning board, it says zoning and the planning board determined included the storage of wood chips is allowed in the general business zone. The storage of it is allowed. And they got that from the zoning code that talks about storage of stone and wood and other things. And they said you could store it there, but you can't make it there. That's the distinction that they made. And they were going, and if you look at that, that was referred to in the zoning certificate. It was discussed by the planning board, and it was a point of contention by the applicant. But that's the way they ruled. They ruled that the storage of the wood chips on the general business lot was allowed based upon the zoning certificate. So unless you think they're wrong, then you rule in favor of them, in favor of the applicant. If you think they're right, then you rule in favor of the planning. According to the zoning certificate, says storage of mulch in bulk, which is permitted by right in the general business zone pursuant to table 6.1 D 811 of the Coventry zoning ordinance, but it's limited to 12 feet high and certain lot coverages, and they put that in there. They put that as a condition.
All right, so they spelled it right out. They took it right from the.
They took it right from the zoning.
All right, so they researched it, and that's how they come up with their,
That's how they came up with their decision.
their decision, so.
I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, the decision was researched and written down. I have no complaints with it. Anybody else? You know, Ron? That's what you're. No problem. Russ, no problem?
No problem.
No problem, okay, no problem.
Well, number 5, again, now they're talking again about, in some regard, about the machinery. The horizontal grinder is limited to 700 horsepower. They didn't have any documentation that it's 700 horsepower. But they had the testimony of a third party who said it was 700 horsepower. And one of the things the planning board insisted on is identifying some sort of maximum horsepower, and they put it in their decision, and that's something that's a verifiable number. So if they send a zoning official out there or a building official out there, they can check it and say,
Well, it gave them something to measure it by.
exactly,
And according to these notes, it's they put the limit at 1,050.
do they? I
Yeah,
think that's
they
for the, I think that's for
That's
the,
for the
that's for the rental. I think that 700 is the limitation for the, I could be wrong, but I think the limitation was 700 for the
one they own.
one that they own.
Yeah, because it says, yes, it does. It says rented.
The applicant owns a 700 because we were trying to establish
How
what
big his was.
what it was. And then they talked about 3 times, a certain time a year, they have to bring in a rental to assist them, and they said you can do that. And then there was a limit on the horsepower on that. Does that make sense?
Yes,
And obviously, there was a whole big discussion about tub grinder, and they specifically said, no, under no circumstances shall a tub grinder be used in, on the, either, you know, obviously on the industrial lot. So, again, that's what they said about the machine. They're saying that she's saying they needed to have documentation to prove it was 700 horsepower.
Well, it could be less than,
Yeah, it could be less,
but can't exceed that.
can't exceed 700. But that could be verified by a zoning official based upon this decision.
Well, that's easy. You just go down there, you can, there should be a tag right on the equipment. You know,
Again, there was testimony by a third party that that's the machine they had on the property.
But that eliminates them to,
That person
700.
was sworn in,
Point one.
that person was sworn in,
it gives a
well, not sworn in, but.
But it gives a
presented as
guide
third
for
party. They don't swear
zoning
them in now.
enforcement official, gives a guide.
It wasn't a zoning official, it was a third party person that.
Right,
that
but
should have-
in
In
the
the
future
future.
or at this time, give us a guide to go by. The town to go by. All right, so I don't have any complaints with that. If anybody else does, right?
I do not.
Okay.
Number 6 says the project is not light industrial, not consistent with the comprehensive plan. Again, this is, an argument is
It's in place before zoning.
and with
Pre-existing.
regard to that, the lot, the industrial lot, there was no zoning at the time that the use started, and there was no comprehensive plan. And state law says that you can never take away a pre-existing use. If you do, you're gonna pay it for it. The town, that's a taking by the town, taking the constitutional, under the Constitution, you can't do it without compensation.
Okay. So it was established before zoning.
Yeah, that use, the use on the property on the light industrial side is pre-existing.
Okay, the young lady has a question.
A pre-existing use is not a grandfathered in clause, I guess you could say. Doesn't mean you have the right to continue to upgrade and add industrial uses that aren't even on the schedule of district use. You do not have, it's not an end all be all, I can do whatever I want on my property. That's not what it's supposed to be. Which is why there's literally a clause in the zoning that says for pre-existing uses, that if there's extension, alteration, and expansion of them, that they would be required for a special use permit. It doesn't make any sense to just throw, nobody's taking away his wood business, but there's limits. You cannot keep growing bigger and bigger on a tiny little lot. Just because it's a pre-existing, condition doesn't mean that he has the right to do whatever he wants on it. It's just, that's not the way the law works. I'm not sure why, then why would we have the clause of special use permits for, non-conforming uses? It wouldn't make any sense.
Ms. Litchfield's right, except that there's no evidence that there's any expansion of this pre-existing use. The pre-existing use, the testimony was this had been pre-existing use for many, many years, pre-existing zoning. That's what the evidence that was presented to the planning board. That was their judgment. Now, there's an example that you can't substitute your judgment for him unless you think they're clearly wrong, and you have to get them being wrong from the record, not by someone just saying this is an expansion. It has to be evidence that it was an expansion of a pre-existing use. There was no evidence presented of that. Not on the record anyway. The evidence was just the opposite, that it was a pre-existing.
Like you say, it's the judgment.
I think that's, but if there was evidence of that it was this particular project and they had quadrupled it, then, and that evidence had been put in, then they would have had something to theoretically hang your hat on.
There's
that
no
would've-
evidence of that.
That would have,
No evidence.
and all it would have meant is that they go get a special use permit that you review. It doesn't mean, and special use permits, as you know, are granted as rights, subject to review. It's not a variance. Special use permit is granted, subject to review, allowed, subject to review, not denied. It's not a variance, it's allowed, subject to review by the zoning board.
Okay.
So I'm
Yeah,
not
I-
trying to argue with her, but the law is a little bit more nuanced than just you have to have evidence of an expansion that requires a special use permit. No evidence was presented to the board.
Okay.
The, so again, that's number 6, whether or not you think, it says it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's,
No, it doesn't apply. Not board, unless the board members agree.
Yeah.
They,
I agree.
well, the other problem is there's no evidence that he expanded.
Well, that wasn't even the assertion here. That was, in number 6, it was just that it was not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Didn't exist when business starts.
Comprehensive plan did not exist when this activity started.
Okay. So we're all set with that.
Number 7, again, we talked about this a while back about whether or not the stipulation in the plan included trucks, not included trucks. The plan, and I guess Mr. Cronin indicates, the stipulation on the decision is any business machinery, equipment, wood chipping during non-business hours needs to be stored and parked within the existing gated area of the business. That would not include trucks parked on the general business side. And Ms. Litchfield is indicating that that trucks should be included. At least that's one thing that was said here.
In the notes, it clearly says business-related equipment / machinery is parked or stored inside of the gate area during non-business hours. It's very broad, and I would interpret that to be trucks.
Well, then I just heard Mr. Cronin indicate that they're interpreting it that it doesn't include trucks. So that
We can agree with this.
So that becomes, right, the interpretation of that. But I don't know if the interpretation of that means that the planning board is wrong.
No, exactly. That's the, again, whether he's parking trucks on the inside of the fence or the outside of the fence is really not something we have no control over. But in my
In this
opinion,
meeting.
yes, in my opinion, it's written here. So they did it correct. Whether that's being followed through is not up for debate right now.
Again, it's like I
Is
said.
that your opinion also?
Well, it's a matter of interpretation of that provision, whether it should be more specific or not.
But we can't talk about that. We have to look at the facts that are presented in front of us.
Did they make a mistake? Or are they wrong?
If they're to list, they don't say you can't have chainsaws outside, you can't have shovel, like.
It's equipment and
right.
by the company would be, hate to use the word, assume that
Exactly.
trucks and front end loaders and bobcats are all part of the business.
Exactly.
And they need to be behind the gate. Whether, like I said, whether that's happening today, we can't talk about that.
It's not up there.
Right.
I agree.
Okay, but even if trucks do come and go out of there because it's a residence.
The residence is on the industrial side of it.
Right.
And the gate that's open is on the industrial side.
Yeah, this is business related. Residents wouldn't be business related.
Right? Because this guy that lives in the house works for stuff.
But even if he does, if it's his personal vehicle.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
But it's not business.
Business-related machinery and equipment.
Business related. I think it spells it right out.
I think it's spelled out. I think they were correct in doing it. I don't find an error in it. You wanted to stretch it by saying, well, we didn't say the word trucks, but we didn't say chainsaws either. You know, or bobcats. They have those like that. It's assumed, yeah, I hate to use that word. But that's what it was. So it was in the decision. My opinion.
Very good.
I agree.
Number 8 says single grind wood chips, not bulk landscape supply. It should not be stored in the, should be stored on the industrial side along with the piles of logs and stumps. And the only thing that should be stored on the GB side is the finished product, trucks and equipment. Again, planning board made a determination that wood chips can be stored on the general business side. I mean, again, I don't know what else to say about that, but they made that determination. They interpreted the section of the ordinance and they also obviously got a zoning certificate that had that language that said that it was allowed on that side. And based upon the zoning certificate and the code, wood chips, they said is allowed on the general business side to be stored.
But I spelled it
So,
right out.
This is more of an opinion as opposed to, is the decision wrong or not? The decision is following the zoning certificate and following the zoning code. Her opinion is they shouldn't be allowed on the general business side, but I don't know what to say about that.
I agree with you. Finished products, wood chips, people buy wood chips spread around the yard, so you could consider that a finished product. But again, it doesn't, I could see where planning came up with the decision to deem wood chips a finished product. If we agree that, no, I don't want to put wood chips on my yard, I want red mulch, that's neither here nor there. It could be considered a finished product.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just so we're clear, the code doesn't say the word finished product, right? The code says landscape supply in bulk includes outdoor storage of aggregate materials, sandstone, bark, mulch, loam, in excess of 4 cubic yards, not to exceed 12 feet in height. And
So you
that's
did
what
it right according to the,
the zoning certificate followed this, but they didn't give that whole definition that I just gave you. That's in the zoning code. They just said that wood chips meets that definition. It says bark, it says mulch.
oh, it is.
So that's where they got it. That's where the zoning certificate and the code match. And that's what the planning board relied on when they said you could store wood chips on the general business side.
I'm okay with it. I agree. Yes,
I agree.
okay. He's okay with it. Yeah.
Number 9, again, talks about the expansion of a commercial wood lot. Again, it talks about noise, vibration, dust, lack of testing. Again, those kinds of problems, dust, noise are all controlled by, noise is controlled by your noise ordinance, which the planning board mentioned. Dust and other kinds of things like that would be a, DEM thing, or another state program. It wouldn't be it's not a zoning function. And they didn't really get into that, but I don't see, she's saying, again, not considered light industrial. Again, this is the argument again. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use in a light industrial zone. Before there was zoning and before there was comp permit. If they were coming today, they'd have to get a special use permit, which is allowed, subject to review. But the zoning certificate said they had a pre-existing non-conforming use. But it's the same, this is the 3rd time that same argument is coming.
Right.
In a different way.
That's good.
In it. Unless there's something, if you think the board's wrong on making a determination according to the zoning certificates,
No,
you would overturn them on that basis.
I don't feel we should.
I agree.
Anyone else? Yes? Do you feel that we should overturn it?
I agree with you.
Okay. Number 10 really talks about the relocation of the horizontal grinder on the industrial lot and everything that was demanded as part of development plan review. The planning board ultimately said, we're either gonna hold you to your pre-existing non-conforming use on the industrial and hold you to your allowable use on your general business, or you're gonna go get a special use permit. They said, we're gonna comply with our non-conforming use on industrial, we're gonna comply with our general business use on the GB lot. We don't wanna get a special. I'm paraphrasing, that's not what they said, but
Right.
that's, so to say that the relocation, the horizontal grinder is wrong. The planning board was trying to have them comply with their uses at that location. So I don't know. I don't know. This has got, I don't really know how the planning board is wrong on this. But
No, I don't see a problem.
the purpose of development plan review is to make sure that you actually have one of these plan like this so that everybody can look at it and know what's happening on it. And that's what the planning board
Gives you a
did,
guideline.
which until this time, there was things going on there that was merged and in violation, and that's why they were sent to development plan review.
All right.
I mean, that's the purpose of and development plan review gives the planning board the authority to do all this. There's a whole list of criteria of how they manage a site to make sure that they try to minimize impacts. I think the issue here that's causing all the debate and the concern, if there wasn't a pre-existing non-conforming use, this would have been an easier decision. But that pre-existing non-conforming use is created a very difficult decision for the planning board. I think you should keep that in mind. They felt constrained to follow that guideline. They couldn't take that away.
I
So
agree.
that's what I'm just trying to, again, I'm paraphrasing what she's saying in her arguments, but I'm also identifying what the planning board is saying. These are not my thoughts. These are their comments and paraphrased in their minutes. So if you think they were wrong to specify where things should be based upon the
No, they
two
did it
lots,
according to their guidelines with the pre-existing condition, and then they used the guidelines for the commercial law.
when I'm reading Ms. Lichtenberg's statement in number 10, I don't know if I'm reading it right, but it seems that one of the things that happened is by mandating that the grinder go on the industrial lot, it removed, it was originally blocked by some bushes, and now it's in the open. At least that seems to be a comment she's making, but they didn't require it to be blocked by bushes in the industrial zone. I don't know if I don't recall that issue coming up on that side. But I think that's one thing that kind of happened. The machine was behind a set of bushes and now it's in front. It's not in front of the property, but it's not behind a set of bushes anymore.
But again, it'd be us interpreting.
I don't think there's any requirement that it goes behind a set of bushes. I just think that's what it was. They were doing some buffering here that they were trying to do, but I don't think there's a requirement. The DPR gives the planning board the authority and the latitude to demand buffering and whatever they can do. But they're not mandated to buffer everything.
Okay, we seem to be okay with this, I agree.
The last one,
Number 11.
Number 11 seems to refer to lack of a gate on the exit that's used all day on Sundays, anytime the entrance gate is closed
It's used as an entrance for landscape trees, so to dump their debris during non-business hours. I mean, if, again, this is more of, unless I'm misinterpreting it, this is more of an enforcement.
Now, what side is that on? Is that on?
I don't know,
industrial
it doesn't really say.
or general business?
It's on the industrial.
Well, that's 24 hours a day.
Yes,
That's what I'm saying.
no, industrial, they stipulated,
I-
Mr. Cronin said,
I don't really understand your whole, your logic about industrial is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A zone isn't zone, it's zone, I got that. Because it's industrial, doesn't mean it has to be open.
No, it doesn't have to be, but.
But they
it's
can.
allowed. Right. Well, what they're saying.
It is
saying
allowed, where does it say it's allowed?
Not, Coventry, what do you call it? Star City Glass, open
Over there.
24 hours a day. Remember?
Yeah, it used to be, yeah.
Industrial?
Yep, industrial, yeah, you're correct.
How can you tell them?
Well, I mean, at the end of.
What is
the end
the,
of- the end of Reservoir, which is
Yeah.
industrial,
yeah,
Astriac and Miozy had his, the two companies that were making asphalt.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they closed the gates. They weren't open.
Right, but I was, I was,
choice. Right.
that's right. I was open 24/7.
By choice. Not by law.
Yeah, you had gates on one part of your property, but not on the other side.
But I'd open them up on weekends to let the trucks in and everything else. And then also, we used
In
to
other words,
run.
it is allowed.
Oh, if you say so, I'll have to believe you.
Well, he's looking it up right now.
I was trying to find out if there was,
They might have changed.
guidelines for hours of operation for industrial
Industrial,
use,
that's-
but I
that's-
just,
I knew
I
years
wouldn't-
ago.
we're kind of getting in the weeds right now, because again, that
They've
really
agreed.
has nothing to do with the.
That's more
with the
of
gate.
enforcement.
But it's still not. It didn't enter into the board's decision, and it's not in the notes at all. It just says that the gate, the existing gate will be closed during non-business hours. It doesn't have a gate on it, it's not an existing gate. So again, it makes sense to have a gate, in my opinion. I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want strange people on my land when I'm not there, but that's me.
It's more of an enforcement thing.
Correct. But again, I don't know that there's, again, that I don't think that, it's not where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be paying attention to whether the board made a wrong decision.
Just follow.
Yep. Oh, yeah, and I don't need support.
Okay.
they spelled out pretty specifically hours of operation of machinery,
Correct, but nothing else.
nothing else. And I think that's because there was a lot of discussion during the hearing about the machinery operating on weekends and Sundays, so that's why I think there's nothing allowed on, I believe, on holidays and Sundays.
Ironically, the industrial side is where the grinder is. And the trucks and equipment are supposed to park in a general business with one of the prepared, with the finished product. To me, it makes sense to have a gate. It doesn't. We really can't. No, I don't think, well, first of all, whether we can or can't. We're not
Right.
supposed to.
Right.
That's what she brought up, and it's a good point. It's not something we can deal with, in my opinion.
I think they addressed the gate issue in the notes. And
The
existing gate, right,
Which is the lower gate.
correct.
That seemed to be the point of contention during the hearing. I mean, now, I don't, I'd have to go back. I don't recall there being discussion about having the entire property gated. But,
No,
whether the
because here it
board-
says the
que-
gated area.
Right. So the real question is, did the board make some sort of error by?
I don't, I mean, went through every item and. That way.
I don't think so.
No.
Those are the 11, I don't know, there were a few other comments raised tonight for the first time, but I don't think they were that much different than,
But we can only address what's on, right?
right, I mean, those are the ones that you're supposed to be addressing. Again, I'm just gonna go mention these, what I have in my notes, and I may not. Again, the trucks loading and unloading and there wasn't a lot of discussion about that. There was some discussion, but there was no, I don't think the planning board made any mandate one way or the other. If they're loading or unloading improperly, the code enforcement, you have other provisions in the code. So the trucks loading and unloading, I don't know what to say about that. I don't recall that being a condition. That's a decision, obviously. Then she mentioned the horizontal line buffer. We just talked about that. Special use permit, she raised in three contexts. One, the general business side for the wood chips. And the planning board said, and the zoning center said that's allowed. The use of the grinder on the industrial side, non-conforming pre-existing use. And the activity on that lot. So those again, been answered, at least they've been answered. Whether you agree with the answer is not your decision, but they've been answered. As far as, and I have to say that as far as saying that there wasn't a full hearing by the planning board, there were two nights of hearings that were at least an hour long each or more, and it was a site visit. And she was to speak. I mean, those are what I have. There may be something else.
Correct, Mr. Igliosi. He happened to mention, I just lost my train of thought so late at night. I just lost my train of thought. What was what you were talking about just before the last thing you were talking about? I'm sorry. Oh, I believe it was the grinder and the legal pre-existing use. Mulch grinding is not part of his grandfathered in status. It is only for the commercial woodlot. The addition of mulch grinding is not part of a legal pre-existing condition. That is a new addition to the property.
Again, all I can tell you, that wasn't the finding or the testimony at the planning board. That's your comment, that's your position, but that wasn't the testimony or the testimony and finding of the planning board was that it is the pre-existing non-conforming use. So you think they're wrong? And it's also, and they got their decision from the zoning certificate. That's where they got their zoning. But that's, again, you have to decide whether they're right or wrong. But that's what they decided.
Okay, upon the information reviewed tonight, and the information given to us tonight, I fail to see when the planning board overextended or ruled improperly with the information given. No evidence has been given to us that they ruled, I mean, this is strictly my opinion on this issue.
They didn't make it.
They did not make any correct. I don't know how anybody else feels.
I agree. In my opinion, I don't see any errors.
Ed? Ed, you agree?
I agree also.
Keith?
Yes,
you
sir.
also? Okay.
Chairman, this time, based on our broker.
Yep.
Vote to uphold.
Okay, do I have a second on that? Russ has made it. I have a second on that. I'm gonna do an individual vote on that. Keith, how do you vote to uphold the planning or not to?
I vote to uphold.
I also vote to uphold. Ed? Ross?
Uphold.
Okay.
And so I would suggest that the board, as a basis for those decisions, incorporate the findings that you made on each of the 11 points raised
That's
by the
correct.
applicant that you
That's
discussed.
how we based it.
And since you ruled to uphold, I would incorporate the respondents' exhibit 1 also as a basis of your decision. That includes the memo and the documents, because in that includes the planning board decision, the
Correct.
planning board minutes, the zoning certificates. So I would incorporate,
All of that must be incorporated in our,
I would incorporate as a
decision,
basis of your
and that's how-
decision,
uh,
the exhibit
Michael.
number 1 of the respondents, exhibit number 1,
number one.
and all your discussion on each one of those 11 points as the basic of your findings, in that way
And the 11 points.
to discuss.
The board agrees on that?
I do. I agree.
Okay. Anybody disagree? All board members agree.
So that's the decision, our draft decision will be based upon that and incorporating these.
Correct. Do we have any further discussion? I see no further discussion on this. I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Keith, seconded by Ross. All in favor, say aye.
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 Nays? Ayes have it. Thank you all for coming.